Freddy, el telón ya está. Voy a sacar...
No, el telón primero, porque no. ¿Ya vamos al aire?
Sí, estamos al aire.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? My name is Fred, and we welcome all teachers who are getting online to TDC 2020. As you can see, this is our second and last training day of the event. And I remind you that the event today will be divided into blocks. Remember, the morning block with 3 presentations from 9 to 12 p.m. And then we came back at 3 p.m. Remember, Peruvian time. As you can see, we have teachers connected from different countries. And we also remind you that you can write your questions in the chat, and we are going to ask our speakers. Please, you can type in the chat, and then we just let them know. And also, we remind you that to obtain your certificate of attendance, you must attend at least 5 conferences. After the event, all registered attendees will receive email with detailed information of the certificate. So we welcome everyone who is joining to the broadcast and kick off the morning with a video from our host, SBS International Bookstore. Please, let's go with a video. Okay, we wait for a second, and the video is gonna be live. The video, please.
En SBS Librería Internacional estamos comprometidos con la educación. Brindamos materiales de calidad que abarcan las más diversas áreas del conocimiento humano en formatos físicos y digitales. Nuestra historia comienza hace 24 años, de la mano de nuestros líderes fundadores. Somos parte del grupo SBS Internacional, con sedes en Argentina, Brasil, Bolivia y Perú. SBS Librería Internacional crece cada día desde 1996. Hoy somos una de las cadenas más grandes en Sudamérica, orientada a producir y distribuir libros y materiales especializados en la enseñanza de idiomas. Nuestro propósito es contribuir en el quehacer educativo, profesional y cultural de nuestra comunidad. Nuestra propuesta de valor, orientada siempre al cliente, a la innovación y a la educación, nos ha permitido posicionarnos como una empresa que no solo facilita contenidos en diferentes idiomas a nuestros usuarios, sino que también nos convierte en un espacio donde se promueve el desarrollo profesional de los docentes, la generación y difusión de eventos académicos y culturales, convirtiéndonos así no solo en un lugar donde se pueda adquirir el libro deseado, sino en un espacio para estar, compartir y aprender. Con la finalidad de satisfacer los requerimientos de nuestros clientes y del mercado editorial, contamos con 16 librerías en todo el país y una renovada librería online en las que presentamos la más destacada producción e innovación editorial nacional e internacional. Somos conscientes de la repercusión de la tecnología en todo ámbito del conocimiento y la recreación, y por ello, SBS Online se posiciona como un potente canal de búsqueda y adquisición de material educativo y recreativo que permite acercar a nuestros clientes miles de títulos a pocos clics de distancia y desde la comodidad de su hogar. Nuestra propuesta editorial contiene materiales y contenidos por áreas temáticas, la enseñanza y aprendizaje de los idiomas inglés, portugués, francés, italiano, español, alemán, entre otros. La formación educativa y profesional cuenta con publicaciones especializadas, académicas y técnicas, libros de interés general con las últimas tendencias de la industria editorial, así como bibliografía clásica e imprescindible. Por todo este desarrollo e innovación corporativa, queremos compartir nuestra conmemoración. En este marco consolidamos nuestra presencia en Perú con librerías ubicadas estratégicamente en los departamentos de Lima, Cusco, Arequipa, Trujillo, Piura, Chiclayo, Iquitos, Huancayo. La librería SBS Online servicios de delivery a nivel nacional, presencia en ferias virtuales del libro, así como presentaciones, streamings, conferencias online, concursos, promociones y sorteos, entre otras actividades. SBS Librería Internacional. Soluciones para quien enseña y para quien aprende.
Well, coming back again. Now, to start the morning, we welcome and thank the editorial Penguin Random House UK for participating for the first time in TDC Peru. Penguin Random House UK is a prestigious publishing house that has within its educational stance the Ladybirds publishing house that has dedicated itself to developing reading material to support English learning. During the quarantine, it opened its reader platform for free. That helped several Peruvian students to continue strengthening their English learning. So, with a great pleasure, I want to introduce our first speaker of the day, the renowned British specialist Danny Mundy, with the topic, Engaging Learners Using Online Readers. Well, a little bit more information about Danny. Danny is currently academic manager at EdSkills Language School in Birmingham. She's also an EAL consultant for Birmingham City Council and runs regular TFL courses to help schools with EAL students. Danny has over 20 years experience in the ELT sector and has just become reading ambassador for Read Pakistan. So, in her free time, she's a material writer and has recently written a course book on public speaking. She has worked as an international trainer for Penguin Random House for the last 4 years. So please, let's welcome to TDC, Danny Mundy. Good morning, Danny. Let's go.
Good morning. Thank you very much for such a lovely introduction, and welcome to everybody who has joined in. So today, my main mission with all of you is to take you through some really engaging, motivating, and interesting ways to look at reading online specifically. So we know with the global pandemic, a lot of things are moving online. And as teachers, we want to really capture the imagination of our learners. So we're going to have a look at some activities that I use when I'm teaching to really help try and engage readers as we move along. Okay. So the other thing we're going to be looking at is learning styles. So the different activities that we use will cater for the different learning styles of the children that we may have in our classes. So perhaps auditory learners, kinesthetic, visual, and read-write. And then another really important part is integrating other skills. So even though perhaps our focus is reading today, by bringing in other key skill areas like speaking and listening and writing, it can really help engage learners, create more interest and motivate them. So this is what we're going to be looking through today. So first of all, we're looking at things that we can do to really help motivate and keep the interest, because for some students, they're classed as reluctant readers. So they may find reading quite difficult. So we need to think out of the box and ways that we can really help them perhaps focus on the reading stage within our class, actually, whether it's online or in a traditional classroom. So you can see here in front of you, we've got some finger puppets. So these can be really, really useful, especially if you have kinesthetic and tactile learners. And we can use them before any reading actually takes place. So encourage the students to cut them out perhaps prior to your class. And if you are doing any reading together in your online lesson, for younger learners, it kind of brings the book to life. So they can use the characters whilst you're reading. So perhaps every time you mention a particular character, they have to hold it up or they have to point it to the screen to where the text of the book is. And this can be really, really useful to help keep them focused on a reading task. And again, tactile and kinesthetic learners, we're not just reading the script from the page, we're actually trying to get them involved in the story. And again, as I said, really bring the book to life. So you can see we've got two different books here, both the same idea. We've got Cinderella, and you can see all of the key characters, and then Peppa Pig with all of the key characters. And the other thing that I would say is quite useful for younger learners is also to use these finger puppets as a marker while you're reading. So if you have some text of a book displayed on your screen, encourage the children, and again, especially younger learners, to use these finger puppets almost to move along like a word pointer to help them focus on the sentence or the paragraph or a particular word. And again, that can be quite a useful task with reading. So this is something I would advocate to use before you do any reading. Let them do the activity, cut it out prior to your class so they're ready to go when you start reading. And again, it just makes it more interactive. And if we can make the reading process interactive, we will increase motivation, engagement, and actually maybe our reluctant readers will be showing more positivity about reading and less reluctance to read something. So again, focusing on kinesthetic and tactile learners, this can be quite useful for any book that you're reading in the classroom. Okay, similarly, if you are teachers of young learners, we know that doing creative tasks can sometimes be really useful before reading, or actually whilst reading or post reading. So you can do the craft or creativity at any stage in the reading process. And again, it's just something to help keep them engaged and focused. So if you were reading the book Cinderella, you can see here we have a crown. So perhaps you could send this prior to the students having an online lesson. And they have to follow the instructions, cut it out. So again, it's quite hands-on, quite tactile and kinesthetic. And then encourage them to put it on when you're doing the reading activity. And this would be similar perhaps to role play in the classroom, which we often rely on. But actually, we're using this prop or realia to help them associate with the book and a form of dress up, for example. And again, it can create a lot of interest. It doesn't have to be the crown. It could be something different. And again, it's a nice way to set the scene. And again, for many reluctant readers, it can be quite tricky to get them involved and concentrated on the reading process. So just by doing this to start with, they're starting to think about what is it? It's a crown. They might start to think about the story. If you're teaching on an online platform, you could encourage all of your young learners to put on the crown so they can all see each other as well, to create as much interest before any reading actually takes place. Okay, so before we start any reading again, I think there's lots of different activities that we can do to set the scene and to create that interest and to change the pace of the activities for the students. So I'm sure you're all familiar with I Spy with My Little Eye, a very traditional game that's been played for many, many years. And I found that it's quite useful when we're using online platforms to help students. And again, if we're looking at learning styles, this is particularly good for visual learners. So as the teacher, if you have your online platform, what I would suggest you do is perhaps behind you have some pictures that are related to a book, a story, or a text that you're going to be focusing on. So you can see behind me, I have a very plain background, which isn't very engaging or interesting for my learners. Whereas if I can make it interesting, related to the topic of the lesson, I can use this in different games and activities before we start. So you can see I've put an arrow on going to the moon. So if you can see that front cover of the book on the screen, you will see we've got stars. It's at night. We can see the moon, perhaps an astronaut. So I would try and source these, either draw them or find a picture or perhaps even a prop and have it in my background somewhere, and use this for I Spy at the beginning of the lesson. It's an inclusive activity, which means all children can take part. So a really effective way to start the lesson. And perhaps at this point, the learners won't know that it's based around a book that we're going to be looking at, but it will help them because the items that I have around me will be vocabulary or lexical items from the book. So perhaps in some ways, this is almost like pre-teaching because I have the objects, we're talking about them, we can play I Spy and so forth. And you can see the other book I've put an arrow to is King Arthur. So any ideas for King Arthur? If you had to make a display around you of King Arthur, any ideas of what you would actually put behind you? Can you ask that as a question? Okay, so maybe a castle, a crown, somebody dressed quite regally. And again, it's a way to elicit, so to draw out information from the learners, or as it says on the screen, to play I Spy with my little eye. So it can be used at the beginning of the class to set the scene for visual learners and to create interest. But at the same time, you could use this as an activity halfway through your reading lesson, just to repeat and recycle and consolidate any vocabulary. And similarly, you could use it as a consolidation task after reading at the end of the lesson. So I think this is quite an effective way for younger learners to set the scene, to help create that interest and get them involved in the reading process, even though no reading has actually taken place. Okay, so I'm not sure how many of you have tried to use virtual backgrounds while you've been teaching online. This is something I have been playing around with because, again, when you look at my screen behind me, it's very blank. It's not very interesting and it's not very engaging. And whilst if I was teaching adults, that's not really too much of an issue. But I think for much younger learners, we do need to think about our background and really think how we can engage our learners as much as possible. So imagine you're going to do a lesson on a storybook or a fairy tale or something. Try and find a virtual background that you can put behind you so the students will be able to see you, the teacher, and then your virtual background. So perhaps this is similar to the I Spy idea where you were putting different pictures around you, whereas this is a complete scene. Now, you don't have to be experts in graphic design to do this, because now I think with online technology and with so many schools teaching online, we have access to so many resources that we can use where these virtual backgrounds are ready-made for you, and you can pick, choose and select for each particular lesson that you're looking at. So it can really be quite interesting for the students. So rather than just seeing you as the teacher, they can see some virtual background and again, relate it to either the topic of your lesson, the book you might be reading, the vocabulary that you're looking at. And there's so many different activities that you can use without a focus on reading to start with. So you can see, set the scene. You can see I have a ladybird one here. So if this was a book on ladybirds, I've set the scene because visually the students can see the ladybird. So immediately as a teacher, I have a resource that I can use with the students, because I can ask questions and I can elicit from them what is the animal, for example, or the insect? How many legs does it have? How many spots does it have on its back? What colors are there, for example? So depending on your background will depend on the questions that you can ask to really get the students involved. And actually, for younger learners, it can be useful sometimes to change your virtual background every time you have a lesson and use that as your starting point to get them speaking and to create that interest. So again, there are so many virtual backgrounds. It's just a case of going to have a look through the different ones and find ones that are suitable, not just for your reading lessons, but actually anything you may be teaching, just to help stimulate the students from the very start of your lesson. So have a go with some virtual backgrounds. Okay, so with reading, it's maybe a bit more difficult online because we don't have the book in front of us. There are lots of ebooks nowadays. So we're going to focus on pre-reading to start with. So how can we make it interesting and how can we cater for different learning styles before we open the book and before we actually start reading? So you can see here, I'm sure you all know this book, very famous, Little Red Riding Hood. So if I was teaching on an online platform, what I would do is hide the title of the book and just focus on the pictures. Again, this is catering for your visual learners, and it's a really useful way to start the lesson. What can you see? What can you tell me about the pictures? You can ask them to think of the title for the book based on what they can actually see from the picture. Now, that sounds like quite a difficult task, but actually for younger learners, the title could just be one word in particular. They may not come up with Little Red Riding Hood. They may come up with the girl, for example, because she's quite dominant in the picture, or the wolf, because they can see the animal, or even the forest. And again, if we take all of these ideas from different students, it's an effective way to practice vocabulary related to the book that we're going to be looking at, just by using the picture that we have in front of us. Prediction is always quite a useful tool in language teaching and for reading. So perhaps we can use the picture to really think about, okay, if you haven't read the story, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to take place? And again, on an online platform, you can use the chat boxes to get students to write answers in. You can also put students into groups and make sections to make an interactive whiteboard so they can write ideas or draw things in there. Or perhaps maybe with a little bit older students, you could use breakout rooms where they could discuss together. So if we say, let's predict or brainstorm words that we think will be in the book, we could think maybe animal, danger, girl, walking, for example, and so forth. And you can do the same activity with lower levels and higher levels, but perhaps change the amount of words that you're expecting from them. So with much younger learners, I would say, okay, let's predict 3 words, just 3 words that you think we will see in the story. And then with much higher level students or older students, you could think of more words. And something else I've used effectively for online teaching for younger learners and also for teenagers and young adults as well is have a timer on your screen, but it's a countdown one that they can actually see. It's quite user friendly. It might look quite visually pleasing, and say, okay, you've got to think of 3 words and you've got 30 seconds. And just having that countdown clock, not just for this activity, but for any activity, can be useful for pace in your lesson. Because as we know, younger learners, it's quite difficult for them to sit in front of a computer for a long period of time without becoming restless and distracted. So the interactive clock can be really, really useful to use. So that's just looking at the front of the book. And actually, by doing these activities, the learners will have a good idea about the story, but actually we haven't started the reading process. And I think this is really, really important. If you have reluctant readers who find it difficult to read, by doing all of these pre-stage activities, it means they probably have maybe 50, 60% idea about the content of the book, but no reading has actually taken place. So again, the integration of skills would be heavily focused on speaking and vocabulary before any reading actually takes place. Okay, so this is just an example for you of the same kind of activity. And I've changed the picture just to see possibly what ideas students would come up with, and then how we can use that as not only an elicitation tool to draw out from the students, but also some concept checking as well. So if I was asking the students to predict or to come up with some words from the front cover of the book, they may come up with children. As you can see, there are 3 children on there. Football, because we have the football. Sport, maybe another possibility, or perhaps sport kit, because they're dressed in typical sports clothes, kit, football. Trainers, maybe football pitch, and then they may comment on the colours, for example. So red, yellow, and then we've got stripes, which is possibly a little bit more difficult. So these would be some example words. And you can ask lots of questions here. For example, do you have trainers? When do you wear your trainers? So again, we're recycling a lot of the vocabulary that is in the book, but again, no reading has taken place. And just in terms of level and how we can do the same activity, but we will get different answers depending on the level of the students. If we hide the title of John's football team and say, okay, what title would you come up with just from the visual in front of you? You can see the first one is just one word, okay, just football. So even when I'm asking for a title, it doesn't have to be 10 words. It doesn't have to be complicated or very long. It can just be one word. So it could be children, football. Here we've got playing football, so a bit longer. Football with friends, perhaps. And then the red and yellow team. And the beauty of this is different students will come up with different ideas. So all of the learners are exposed to different vocabulary, which can be really helpful in talking about the topic of the book. Again, pre-reading before any reading actually takes place. So, do you all look at the blurb of the book? So if you're reading a book with your students, do you look at the blurb on the back? So you can see I've got an example blurb here. And this is from the back of Little Red Riding Hood. And again, this is a really useful tool for teachers to use because it's a very small, condensed summary of the book in a much easier way for students to understand. And we can use that before we start reading to really help them understand maybe the idea of the book, the characters, the concept, for example. And we can use it again as an elicitation tool, which is so important in language classes because we want to maximize that student talk time as much as possible. So we could ask them to read it and ask some questions. So who was the girl? Little Red Riding Hood. Where did she go? To her grandmother's house. What was the animal that you saw in the blurb? The wolf. And again, you can make the questions quite simple or more difficult depending on the ability of your learners. So again, if we think of reluctant readers, which I'm sure you've all come across at some point when you've been teaching, a lot of text and a whole book, or sometimes even a whole page, can be quite difficult for them. Whereas here we've just got a very, very small amount, which is summarizing the main story, which makes it much more manageable and gives them a really good understanding of what's going to happen. So perhaps then the reading process will be much easier because of these pre-stage activities. So the blurb is always a really good thing to do. Again, predictions. This is another way to help get our students speaking before we do any reading. So what do you think will happen next? What did the wolf do? What happened to Little Red Riding Hood? And when at the beginning we said about an integration of skills, a good reading lesson should always involve other skills, because this helps create more balance, it can make it more interesting, and again can help different learning styles in the class. So perhaps we could have a grammar focus. So as you can see here, I've just put an arrow pointing up to the blurb, and the grammar focus would be the past simple tense. So you could say to the learners, can you underline, can you see, can you notice any examples of the past simple in this short summary of the book? So we can see we've got went in the first line, we've got lived in the second line, and then wanted in the last line. And again, we could expand on that a little bit more and break it down into regular past simple verbs and irregular past simple verbs. And this is using reading as an effective tool to look at grammar and to practice grammar. So always have a look at the blurb at the back of the book, because it can be a really, really useful tool, especially for pre-reading activities. Once you've actually finished reading a book within the class or with your students, what you can do is ask them to write their own blurb. Because again, similarly with reading, students can be reluctant to write as well. It can be quite difficult. Whereas here we've got 3 sentences. It's a very condensed amount. It's quite short, which means it could be more manageable for the students. So perhaps after you've read, as a post-reading activity, you could ask them to write their own blurbs. Okay, so again, my main mission whenever I'm teaching is to make it engaging and interesting for my learners, so that when they've gone away from the class, they've actually remembered things. So sometimes we need to think of different ways and methods that we can help activate the language for our learners and help them really remember the content of what we've been doing. So can you all just have a quick read around this circle? It may make you a little bit dizzy going around. So this is the blurb from Little Red Riding Hood that we just looked at, but you can see I've presented it in a completely different way. And again, I'm thinking of engagement here. So if you have reluctant students, maybe the traditional form of a book, immediately they don't seem that interested and they don't want to participate. So as teachers, we need to be creative and think, okay, well, how can I grab their attention? How can I get them to focus on the words and so forth? So again, technology nowadays, there are so many amazing things that we can use and integrate into our lessons. So I've just found an app that I use, and I can type in different words. It could just be vocabulary. It could be sentences. It could be 3 sentences as we have here. And you can display it in many, many different ways. So we've got a circle here. You could do a wave, for example, or it could mix everything up. So you can do it in any which way you prefer. And this may create a little bit more interest for the students because they have to move a little bit to read round. And it's something different. It's presented in a very different way to a normal book or a normal text. So I found this quite effective, especially maybe at the beginning of the lesson, to get them focused on the task in hand. And again, it creates that interest. Useful, as I said, for reluctant readers. The traditional text, maybe they back away from, but something that like this looks different and maybe a bit more visually pleasing. And maybe students have to read a little bit more carefully because of the shape, because they have to go around and look at each word individually. So you can use this idea in many, many different ways. Perhaps when you've finished reading, you could put all of the key words from the book that are really important and put them in a different shape and say to the students, okay, have a look at these words and then write a story or write a sentence or come up with a role play. But it's just about presenting it in a different way. So have a go at that, because that seems to have worked quite well for a lot of my reluctant readers. And this is something quite similar. You may have used this before. And again, maybe take a picture related to a book that you're going to read in class, or even you could just forget about the pictures and focus on the text. But I think generally with younger learners, anything with pictures is much better because it's more visual. And again, we're looking at technology here, and there are many apps that you can use for puzzles. So have a picture and some text, or just the picture or just the text, depending on age and level, and put it onto your screen and make it into a jigsaw. And then students can put the jigsaw back together. And it's not a reading activity, but it's focused on the reading in hand because it's related to the book. It's from the book. And it can be quite useful. Maybe the students can give you instructions so you can move the puzzle around. It needs to go here, or put it in the left-hand corner. And again, you can change the activity depending on the level of your students. So again, it's not a reading task, but it's something that can be really effective when you're teaching reading online in all your pre-stage activities before you actually start any reading. And again, the same theme throughout. It's trying to help reluctant readers. So have a go at the puzzle. Really, really interesting for younger learners. Okay, and you can see the title here says Bring the Book to Life. Probably the most important thing that we can do as teachers is try and bring the book to life as much as possible in different ways and at different stages. So you could do this before you start reading. You could perhaps do some reading with your students online, then stop and use this activity, or you could do it post-reading as well. So it's quite flexible in how you actually use it. And this is my realia, or if you're not familiar with that term, realia is just props or real life objects. So you should be able to see here, we've got a wolf and a basket. So I'm trying to collect objects related to Little Red Riding Hood. So perhaps I could have some flowers as well, because she was carrying the flowers in the basket. Maybe a toy plastic tree because of the forest. So just think about all of the props, realia, or objects that you can use, and have a tray that the students can see when you're teaching online. And this, again, can be a nice activity. You can hold up the items and the students can tell you, what is it? What do they know about it? Or perhaps you could hold up one item to one of your learners and they have to describe it, and the other students are listening and they have to try and guess what it is. So there's many different ways that this can be used, but again, very, very effective for visual learners and to set the scene of the book that you're going to be reading. If you're using a platform like Zoom, you could perhaps put all of your students into gallery view, so then it's quite an inclusive session, and ask the students, okay, what is it? Can you describe it? How do you think it's related to the book that we're going to read if it's a pre-stage activity? So why would you use a tray of props or realia? Well, I think it's an effective way to consolidate vocabulary. And again, sometimes having that picture or prop can really help activate memory and help students to have more active language rather than passive language. And something else you could do with this is use it as a memory game. So I'm not sure about yourselves. As I've got older, and definitely as I've got over 40, my memory has gone quite a lot. When we're younger, generally our memories are much better. But there will always be some students in the classroom who find it really difficult to remember things. They may be quite bright and they may be able to write things down, but they struggle with remembering key grammar items or key vocabulary. So if we have a tray of props, we can take them away and just keep doing that throughout the lesson, and then draw their attention back and say, okay, which item is missing? And I think memory games are a really effective way to bring in study skills in your classroom. And I think memory is really important, especially when we have a lot of new vocabulary related to a book that we're looking at. Okay, so flashcards. We've all used flashcards for many, many years. Really, really useful. And again, sharing your screen on online platforms, it can be really useful to use flashcards. So what you can do here is many, many different things. And again, it depends on the level of your students. And it's a clear focus on speaking activities before any reading actually takes place. So you can see here, we have the forest. So you could hide the word and elicit from the students what the word is. And again, that will depend on the ability of the students. So you could have just the flashcard on your screen at the beginning of your lesson and say to your learners, okay, let's do some brainstorming. What can we see in the picture? What can you tell me? And then you could put brainstorming around the flashcard or open up an interactive whiteboard and write them down. Perhaps with higher level students, they could give you a description. So rather than individual words, so I can see flowers, a tree, a hut, some grass, they could link all of those ideas together to make some sentence, a simple sentence or complex sentence for higher level students. Or perhaps again, think about using the timing element where you have your countdown clock and timer, and say to the learners, okay, let's have a flashcard race game where they need to come up with as many ideas from the flashcard as they can. You could do it in the chat box, or again, split students into groups on interactive whiteboards. Flashcards don't just have to be used at the beginning. We could maybe whilst reading, we've read a page or 2 pages, we could then put up some flashcards just to help them remember some of the key themes, key topics, and again, post-reading as well. Catering for visual learners, and we're integrating the idea of speaking, even though our focus is on the reading and the book. So again, just to reiterate, before reading, they could guess the words, you can cover the word, and they come up with the word themselves. While reading, perhaps you could use it as a prompt if they're getting stuck. So maybe you're trying to get some information from the students and they can't remember the word. So we can hold up flashcards so they have that visual recognition that perhaps will help them remember the word. And after reading, you could split learners into groups and give each group maybe 3 flashcards or 4 flashcards, and they have to use them to come up with their own story, to do some writing, or perhaps to do some kind of role play based on the flashcards that they have. And then when they all demonstrate their role plays, they'll all be listening to different vocabulary, because each student will have different flashcards. Okay, so within the Ladybird Readers, this is my favorite resource. In each book, there are picture words before the text starts. And again, this is a fantastic resource for teachers because immediately you have those key characters or key vocabulary items from the book, but you have the pictures. So again, there's that association for the learners, and it can make it a really useful reading task to perhaps do some pre-teaching of vocabulary for younger learners. Therefore, it takes the fear factor away a little bit about reading because they've looked at the main words or the main characters, as you can see here. So we've got tortoise, hare, and fox. So again, vocabulary review. We could ask them to make sentences. So again, the idea of eliciting to increase that student-student interaction. Or post-reading. So often when we do a reading activity in class, we ask the students to maybe do some writing afterwards. Now, sometimes it's difficult to write in our own language. So in another language, it can be even more tricky. Whereas if we have the pictures, it's a really good visual stimulation to help them with the writing process. Okay, and then I've put to activate schemata. So activate schemata is looking at their previous knowledge. So what do they know about these pictures or characters already? So these picture boards are really, really useful. This is another example with Pocahontas. So you can see the characters are very different. We've got the chief, Pocahontas, and then some of the key words from the book. And again, they can be used in so many different ways. So if we look here, with the pictures, you could talk about each picture, or perhaps you as the teacher to start could talk about one of the pictures. You don't mention the word, and the students have to look at the picture board and think, okay, what is the teacher referring to or talking about? And then encourage the students to do that with each other. Okay. So as it says, one student describes a picture, the other student listens and chooses the correct picture. Again, as an aid for a writing activity, or perhaps get them to work in pairs or small groups and use the visuals to summarize the story. So that would be more a post-reading activity. And again, for us as teachers in the language classroom, we need to elicit, so draw out from our students, and we need to concept check. So the pictures can be really, really useful as an elicitation tool and also for concept checking. Some students may prefer to draw. So perhaps if one student is describing a word, the other student could draw, and then they can compare the drawing with the actual picture from the picture board. So that would be quite useful as well. So lesson plans, really useful sometimes when you have lesson plans prepared for you. And you can see here, we're reading, we're looking at books, but there's a real focus on all of the vocabulary and how to get the students to remember the vocabulary. And here it's separated into animals, adjectives, and verbs. And then we have our grammar focus with can and can't. So again, reading and using reading as a way to focus on vocabulary as much as possible, but also to integrate grammar items within the book as well can be really, really useful for the students. So you can see at the top here, we have the blurb, so the back of the book, which is from The Tortoise and the Hare. And it says, hare is fast and tortoise is slow. Hare and tortoise have a race, but can tortoise win? So if we're focusing on vocabulary, immediately we have that opposite, fast and slow. So if I think back to when I learnt French and Spanish at school, we often learnt in opposites because it makes sense. And it's almost like you have one word and you get another word free. So encouraging looking at opposites can be really useful to help students remember two words rather than one. So we could really focus here on fast and slow and get the students to demonstrate, maybe if they're on gallery view. Okay, can you jump up really fast? Can you sit down really slow? So they're really using the language. And again, for kinesthetic and tactile learners, that's useful because sitting down at a screen for long periods of time can be quite tricky. Whereas if they're actually up and moving around and you're using the vocabulary to get them up and moving around, it can be really, really useful. So then it says, hare and tortoise have a race, but can tortoise win? So here with this sentence, it's the perfect elicitation tool that we can use with our students and get them to think about their own ideas. Well, do you think the tortoise can win? Because he's very slow, and maybe get them to predict some ideas about what is going to happen in the actual story. And again, if we look at the categories here, animals, adjectives, verbs, what we could do is have these in categories on our screen and get students to come up with sentences. So the first sentence, we can have foxed, fast, and eat. And they have to try and come up with a sentence using the animal, the adjective, and the verb. And that can be quite a nice activity to do and quite engaging, and perhaps have the visuals as well, so it's more interesting for them to have a look at. Okay, so differentiation. So the reason why we're looking at different learning styles and different approaches to reading is because every student will learn things very differently, and some students will really enjoy the reading process and some students will find it very, very difficult. So differentiation can be really important, looking at different ways. So how can we present this reading text through visuals, through getting students up and moving around, through getting them to listen, for example, so that we're catering for every student in our class, not just a small proportion in our class. And again, each of the readers will have differentiation, so you have some ready-made ideas that you can use. Okay. So how important is audio? We've spoken quite a lot about visual learners, about perhaps kinesthetic and tactile learners with some of the realia and the props, but we haven't said much about auditory learners. So again, if we have reluctant readers, so students who find reading difficult, the fact that many readers nowadays have an audio can be really, really useful, not just for the student, but also for the teacher, because what they read on the page, they may struggle with. But when you actually play the tape script to them, suddenly it opens their eyes, it makes sense, the vocabulary comes to life a lot more. So really, really useful. So each of these readers have the tape script that you can listen to. And again, you can use this in so many different ways. You could play the script before you do any reading and get them to see how much they've understood. What did they know about it? Did they hear any key vocabulary? And perhaps you could use it with the picture board in the front of each book. So they listen and tick when they see each picture or character. So a real focus on auditory learners. But again, you could do it whilst reading. So you've read a paragraph or you've read a page. Now use the audio to consolidate in a different way. So we're looking at different learning styles. And again, or post-reading, once you've finished the book. Perhaps we're asking the students to do some written work. By listening before they do the written work, it may really, really help them, especially the auditory learners. So I think this is really important because as a language teacher, our students often feel very safe listening to us as teachers. And they always say, we can understand our teacher. We know what she's saying. She's got a nice accent, or her speed is okay for me to understand. And then we play a video or a clip or some music and they panic because it's a different voice, it's a different accent, and they can think they're speaking quickly, it's not my teacher. So I think one of the most effective things that we can do in the language classroom is actually expose our students to as many different voices as possible, so they become accustomed to listening to different voices and different accents. And even nowadays with smartphones, for example, there are so many recordings that we can put on. And I often ask my husband and my children and my mum and my sister, and I give them a short script and ask them to speak. And I use that in my classroom because it's not my voice. And then the students are listening to something else. So again, it caters for auditory learners, but also it's just an important language skill, because if you think of English as a global language, we all speak so differently. And by exposing students to different voices can actually be a really effective tool for learning languages. Okay, so we've got a scavenger hunt here. So perhaps you've done some reading or part of reading online with your students, and then you ask them to go home and do some homework and say, okay, this is what we've read today. Go into your house and see if you can find 2, 3, 4, or 5 objects related to the book. And at the start of the next lesson, you can have all of the students on gallery view and they can show you these objects. So this can be really, really useful. Similar, I'm sure, to traditional classrooms of show and tell, which is a typical activity globally, but this is just adapting it for the online platform. And they can talk about their objects, they can share them, there will be interest because there's different realia that the students have and they can see. But from an educational point of view, it's an effective way to consolidate vocabulary. Well, how does your object relate to the book? So we're repeating and recycling as much as possible, which is really, really important. I've put here 2, 3, 4, or 5. It will depend on the level of your students and their age. Maybe much younger learners, just 1 or 2 objects. Again, teachers know their students better than anyone else. So think about how many objects would be best for your students. But again, we're bringing the book to life, which really helps the whole reading process. So a scavenger hunt can be really, really useful for the online platform. Okay, so role plays. How do we do a role play online? So you can see here there is a role play that's ready-made for you, and each graded reader will have that. But I think we need to think about how we can use it online, because it's such an effective tool that we use in traditional classrooms. So think maybe of the gallery view that you have on most online platforms, where you can see each student individually. You can give them each their character, and they can do the role play together collaboratively as a task. So one student will go first, then the next student, then the next one, and they're all watching each other and listening to each other. So slightly different to how we would do it in the classroom, but I would encourage the students to maybe stand up and use some body language as well, because again, sitting down for a long time can be quite difficult for them. So there are ways that we can use role plays. It will just be quite different to how it is in the classroom. Okay, so there's an example of Pocahontas. You can see we've got narrators, characters, so a really useful consolidation task at the end of reading. And this one, we've got the tortoise and the hare. So here we've got 3 characters. So perhaps you could ask 3 students to do it, and then another 3 would do it. Or if the students are good with technology, then breakout rooms can be quite useful and they can practice together. But of course, with breakout rooms, that will very much depend on the age and level of your students. Okay. And again, the visuals of the book. So we're looking at reading, but using the visuals within a book to ask lots of different questions, to integrate grammar and fun activities. So you can see here, they could describe the picture. You could hide the text and they could write their own text or predict their own text. One student could describe what they can see on the page and the other student draws. Okay, and perhaps cover something up and describe it, and they need to say which person it is. So guess who activities. So then there's visual, there's quite tactile activities in there with drawing as well. Acting out, they could move around a little bit, even if you were doing it on an online platform. So again, just a real focus on online activities and how to make it interesting and engaging for our students. These are some activities from the back of the book. And again, we can see, if you look at number 3, questions and answers. So role play kind of scenarios to encourage a lot of speaking, which will recycle the vocabulary. You can see the words in a big circle and they have to look and find the words. So again, more interesting for it to be presented like this than just words on the page. And with all of these activities, it's quite high student-student interaction. So we're looking at maximizing the student-student interaction and decreasing some of the teacher talk time. So just some other activities before we come to the end of this presentation that I use quite a lot in the classroom and also with my own children, because we've had to homeschool for quite a long time. Picture bingo. So if you've got very young learners, think about the pictures that we had on the picture board and use that at the end of your lesson to consolidate the key characters and the key words. It's a nice end to the lesson and it's quite interesting, and it really caters for visual learners as well. So again, we're integrating these different skills for different types of learners. Pictionary can be a nice, effective way to end your class. So they're explaining key characters or words, and then they're drawing. So auditory, this is really good because the listening and the tactile nature of drawing. Perhaps a word association game really, really quickly at the end of the lesson and say, okay, how many words can you think of related to Little Red Riding Hood? And the students either have to raise their hand and give an answer, or perhaps do a chat box race where they have to keep typing, or separate the interactive whiteboard into different areas for different students, and they have to put as many ideas as possible. And then the last one here is jigsaw reading tasks. So breaking down large bits of text to small bits of text. So half of the class read paragraph 1, half of the class read paragraph 2, and then they share their ideas together. And again, for reluctant readers, this can be really, really useful. Okay. Non-fiction, just the last thing really I'm going to mention. Not all students like the idea of a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it can be difficult to capture their attention with reading. So nowadays, with so many non-fiction readers, it can be really useful as a tool for reluctant readers. And I know because my oldest son, he was a reluctant reader, and he much preferred using non-fiction because he liked looking at the facts and the information. And we're still going through the reading process and exposing them to vocabulary, just in a different way. So if you do have reluctant readers in your class, think about using non-fiction because they can be really, really useful. Okay. And just some other creative craft activities. If you have a look at the website at the top, there's quite a lot of activities, things that you can cut out, like word pointers and different crowns and costumes that you can cut out for reading, and also lots of certificates that you can have a look at with your students. Okay. Oh. Okay, and that just brings us to the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, all of you, for listening.
Okay, Miss, what we collected some questions from the attendees. So the first question, what we got is from Nick. Nick's question is this: how could you engage the older learners in the readings?
In reading. Okay, really good question, Nick. My oldest son is 16 and he hated reading. And I found it really difficult, especially as an English teacher, because he didn't enjoy reading. I think personalization is hugely important. What you need to do is find that hook that you can grab their attention. So really thinking about what they enjoy, what topic do they like, and finding a reading that will focus their attention maybe on a hobby they enjoy, on a topic, but also to think that it's not always about storybooks, like we said, with non-fiction. So reading can be absolutely anything, even things like cartoons for older students can be really, really useful. Okay.
Well, we have another question.
Okay.
Which are the most common books which you can recommend us? This is Diana Atencio.
Okay, brilliant question. There are so many books nowadays, and I love reading. But again, I think it really very much depends on the learning style of the students and what they enjoy. For me personally, if you remember the slide with the non-fiction books, I think non-fiction are really, really interesting. They can learn so many different facts. It can be used in other lessons, maybe history and geography. And it's something a bit different because often when we think about reading, we think of the traditional story. So I quite like some of the non-fiction books. I think students enjoy them too.
Okay, the other question from Jenny Isabel. She said, what strategies of prediction do you recommend?
Okay, so prediction can be really, really useful in the classroom, and we use it a lot as teachers to get them to think about the topic that we're looking at or the book we're going to read. And it can be useful to create that safe learning environment. I think we need to change the prediction skills that we use for each particular class. So think back to some of the presentation. Visuals can be really useful. What happens next? Or give them some snippets of examples and then say what happens next. I'm trying to think. If I was going to do a newspaper article with some older students, what you can do is find a picture for each word in the newspaper article and have them displayed in like a cartoon strip and get the students to work together and come up with the title. So just off the top of my head, last week I was doing a teacher training session on a newspaper article, and it was Paris Hilton arrest for drink driving. And each picture represented a word from the title, and that can be really, really useful as a prediction tool. So I think relying on visuals can be really, really useful.
Okay, and we have another question more. Ana
Okay.
Maria Cisneros, she asked, can you tell us which app do you use to type in circle?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What she said is like, can you tell us which app do you use to type in circle?
Ah, okay, yes, I do. It's called Festicite. Shall I write it in the chat box?
Right.
Festicite, that one. Yeah. That's just one. I'm sure there are so many different ones that you can use, but that's the one that I've used on a regular basis. And it just helps make it a bit more interesting for some of the learners.
Cool. We're gonna share this in the chat for them. And the last question, but not least, Maria Lourdes. What she said is, to what extent proofreading could be a meaningful activity to provide enough input to our students?
Okay. It's quite difficult at the moment with an online platform with reading. I think what we have to do is break it into stages. So pre-reading, what you do whilst reading, and what you do post-reading to make it meaningful overall. And then also catering for each learning style and ability within the class. So I think looking at reading strategies, so things depends on the age of the learners, but with older learners, it could be skimming and scanning. I think one of the best things we can do as teachers, which is sometimes mission impossible, is encourage our students to do extensive reading outside the classroom, because reading in general will help their vocabulary, then in turn will help their grammar, their writing, and other skills. So I think breaking it down definitely into pre, whilst, and post would be useful.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Miss. We really appreciate it. Have a good morning and a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, just to continue now, what we have to do now is we want to welcome back to Nat Geo editorial, and to get a little bit more information about a publisher. Please, I invite you to watch the next video. Tim, let's go, please, for the next video. Right away, in a second.
At National Geographic Learning, we serve English learners by reflecting the mission and work of National Geographic in our programs. We are inspired by Alexander Graham Bell's original goal for the magazine to be about the world and all that is in it. And we try to bring the world to the classroom and the classroom to life. If you look at our learning programs, you'll see that they're like workbook versions of National Geographic, filled with incredible photography, fascinating stories, and the real work of explorers. Explorers in particular resonate with learners because the explorer's search for knowledge and understanding is the very essence of education. At National Geographic Learning, we believe it's an incredible world, and we want to share that with students. We want students to be filled with awe and curiosity by amazing photographs and stories of their world and all that is in it. Because we know that a curious student is a motivated student, and we believe that a motivated student will be a successful student. With our programs, we're always mindful that we're not just teaching vocabulary and grammar. We're opening up the world to students who have otherwise not experienced it. Students in China, Vietnam, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Eastern Europe, literally everywhere. We want to help these students experience their world and develop their voices. Besides having great National Geographic content, we also work with TED Talks, and we are TED's exclusive partner in English language education. TED Talks are the single most widely sourced videos for English learners, popular both because of the ideas in the talks and because of the natural English used by both native and non-native TED speakers. Ultimately, the incredible content we have from National Geographic and TED enables us to develop programs that are relevant, motivating, and powerful learning tools that bring the world to the classroom and the classroom to life.
Well, coming back again. Now, what we are going to present our second speaker of the morning, the renowned specialist and consultant, Luciana Fernandez, with a topic, the power of visual literacy to enhance language thinking skills. Well, let's know a little bit more about her. Luciana Fernandez is a graduated English teacher and a teacher educator who has 26 years experience in the field of education. She has specialized in methodology, teaching practice, early years education, literacy, and critical thinking. She holds a diploma in education research from University of Cambridge, Faculty of Education. She has also 2 postgraduate certifications in teaching for comprehension and thinking cultures. Luciana has presented at numerous congresses in teaching for comprehension. Luciana has presented at numerous congresses and conventions, both nationally and internationally, and was awarded an IELTFL scholarship in 2016. Currently, she is a senior academic consultant for National Geographic Learning and Trinity College London, Argentina, and she is an educational advisor at several schools. She has been both teacher and head teacher at several institutions in Buenos Aires, and she has been a teacher trainer at SRP, English Speaking Scholastic Association of River Plate, for the past 14 years. Please welcome to TDC, Miss Luciana. Good morning, Miss. It's all of you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? Hello. It is so nice to see so many people here. And I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you today, saying hello from a stormy morning in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So it's a privilege for me to be part of this fantastic event in which I will be talking about the power of visual literacy to enhance language and thinking skills. So if you are all ready to start, let's do so. Okay, next slide, please. We are going to get started today with the big questions that we will be addressing as we move on. The big questions we will be discussing today are the following. What is visual literacy? Why does it matter? How does visual literacy enhance thinking skills? How does visual literacy enhance language and communication skills? And of course, how do we work on visual literacy in the language virtual classroom? Of course, let me say the following. If you happen to have any questions, make sure you write them in the chat box so that we can address them at the end of my presentation. So having introduced the big questions for today, next slide, please. So the first thing we are going to do now, I'm not going to take for granted everybody knows what visual literacy is. So we are going to start it by defining visual literacy because, my dear colleagues, visual literacy happens to be one of the critical 21st century skills. Next slide, please. So, if I have to put it simply, visual literacy refers to the ability to read, write, and create visual images. Of course, visual literacy refers to a group of competencies, a group of skills which should be worked on in an integrated manner. And visual literacy, of course, is about language, communication, and interaction. So if you split visual literacy into two, you've got visual, it has to do with images, pictures, maps, graphs, drawings, illustrations, and literacy refers to the fact that our students need to think critically about visuals. Next slide, please. So I really wanted to share with you a quote from The Age of the Image, okay, by Stephen Apkin, saying that we are talking here about the ability to express oneself in an effective way through the text of the moment, the prevailing mode of expression in a particular society. To be literate, in other words, it's to be conversant in the dominant expressive language and form of the age. And I don't know if you agree with me, my dear colleagues, but we are in a world that is more visual than ever. Our students are bombarded with visuals. That's how they have access to information. So this means that if our students live in a fully visual world, they need the critical thinking skills to make interpretations out of all those visuals they have access to. Next slide, please. Oops. Okay, we're going to give my presentation a moment to come back. All right, so we need to remember that there was a moment when literacy was acquiring a set of cognitive skills that had to do with print media, because that is exactly how people accessed information. This had to do with a conception of literacy that was related to the type of access to information that people had. So if print media was what was happening in the world of these students, that was the conception of literacy in that moment. But as we said before, with this question of the digital era and this question of globalization, and with the advance in technology and internet, the world has become more and more visual, which means that the concept of literacy, of course, also needs to change. Next slide, please. So something that is really very interesting to discuss today is that actually the kind of access that our students have to information today is presented through multimodal ensembles. And I wanted to clarify this for you. What are multimodal ensembles? A variety of cultural and semiotic resources that articulate, render, represent, and communicate an array of concepts and information. So many of the digital creations that our students have access to are examples of multimodal ensembles because they consist of different media put together. This means that students access information in a format that has several layers. So my dear colleagues, my call of attention today has to do with the fact that the needs and demands when it comes to literacy have changed, and we teachers need to address this. Next slide, please. So, visual literacy is about reading visuals and our students writing or producing visuals. So when it comes to reading visuals, we are talking about our students' competencies, abilities, skills to find the right visuals they need, access the visuals they need, analyze fully the visuals they actually encounter, evaluate, and here I am talking about assessing the visual to see if it is reliable, if it is real. It's about making interpretations out of a visual. It's about responding emotionally to what a visual presents to me. And most importantly, it's about being critical. It's about questioning visuals. And then when it comes to producing or writing visuals, we are talking about using creativity to communicate ideas to others through visuals, designing, planning, developing, and expressing oneself through a visual. Next slide, please. So we have already defined what visual literacy is. We have somehow begun to determine its importance, but now we are going to go deeper into that. Why is it critical that we teachers include in our lessons the explicit teaching and development of visual literacy? And these are the considerations we need to bear in mind. Our students are surrounded by multimodal ensembles. This means our students hardly have access to just print now. And if you pay attention, let me just share an anecdote with you all. But my own kids tell me, and if you think about social media, my own kids tell me that Facebook is something that older people use. And once I said, what do you mean by that? Do you know what they told me once? Oh, it's got so much print. Just think about the social media our new generations use the most. They are highly visual. They are definitely multimodal ensembles. Digital technology has transformed the way in which we tell stories. We tell stories by posting a photo on Instagram. We post a story by sharing a tweet. The more technology moves forward and the more social media develops and changes, the needs for literacy development also need to change. More and more images are replacing words, or more and more these multimodal ensembles are a combination of a few words and images. So visual literacy is going to empower our students to be critical about these multimodal ensembles they have access to. Next slide, please. So if students are accessing these types of multimodal ensembles, right? If this is the reality, if this is what they come across all the time, shouldn't we attempt to create similar pedagogical engagement when designing the lesson content? So I am pretty sure you will agree with me, dear colleagues, when I say that education prepares students for life. So if this is our students' reality, if this is how they interact with the world, I think we have a huge responsibility in creating similar opportunities in our language classrooms. Next slide, please. So we have already defined visual literacy. We have already discussed why it matters. And now I would like to move on to a third big question, all right? Can you please go back to the previous slide? Thank you. Thank you. The third question is going to be, how does visual literacy enhance thinking skills? Because as the title of my presentation anticipates, I am today discussing not only visual literacy for the sake of responding to the demands of a visual world, but I would also like to show you, dear teachers, that visual literacy promotes wonderful opportunities to teach thinking skills and also language skills. Now we're going to focus on thinking skills. Next slide, please. So, if visual literacy means to look beyond the frame of an image, in the same that reading between the lines is required to unpack a written text, this means that the time has come now, dear teachers, to talk about reading comprehension. And today we are not going to be talking about reading comprehension of a text. I somehow realized that this has been the topic in the previous presentation, so fantastic. Today we're going to be talking about the reading comprehension of an image, because we also, just as we read texts, we read visuals, we read images. And when it comes to reading comprehension, we need to understand that reading comprehension is like an onion. It's got layers. The outer layer of comprehension is the literal level, the surface. When it comes to discussing images, the literal is asking a student, what can you see? We will all answer the same things because that's what we see. That's the surface. But if we go through the surface and we move on to the next level, we've got the inferential level, which means that now what we see begins to interact with our prior knowledge. So we need now to push our students into making inferences. You see the following in an image, and what you see activates your prior knowledge. The combination between what you see and what you think about what you see ends up in an inference. But we can keep on digging in. And now we've got the emotional level of comprehension, which has to do with an emotional response to what I see. What is happening to me as I look at this visual? What emotions appear in me? How do I feel about it? And if we keep on moving, then there's the critical level of comprehension, in which now I express my opinion about what I see. I am judging what I see. I am being a judge, and of course, I am saying why my judgment is such. And last but not least, there's the creative comprehension level. The moment in which we ask our students, now what? Now what with what you are actually looking at? Can you try to discover the story behind it or create a story behind it? What could you change about this picture? We push our students into thinking outside the box. So just as when students read a text, not all the answers explicitly in the text, because true reading of a text is the interaction between the reader and the text, same thing happens with visual literacy. It is the interaction between the viewer and the image. Next slide, please. So a question to ask here is, how do illustrations in texts, pictures in texts, and other visuals affect how we understand, feel, and connect to the characters, events, or ideas in them? Just as I was in the backstage of this wonderful event, I was listening to the previous speaker talking about skimming and scanning. How important it is to skim through a text before reading it. What do all the visuals that come together with a text, the paratext, actually get me to start thinking about what the text I'm going to be reading about might be about? Next slide, please. So if we enhance students in this, we're going to give our students the possibility to make personal connections. We're going to give them the possibility to make inferences, all right? Remember what I see and what that activates in me. We're going to give them the possibility to actually make predictions about what they might be reading about based on the images I'm analyzing. It's going to even give our students the possibility to ask questions. I'm looking at this, and as I am looking at this, I am wondering. Questions come to my mind. It's going to give our students the possibility to use their senses. As I am looking at a visual, I imagine what is it that I would be feeling if I were there. What would I see if I were there? What would I be smelling, tasting, feeling? And of course, it's also about state relevance, because just as the same way you do with a text in which not everything is key, there are some main ideas and then there's the periphery, same thing happens with images. There are salient and very important things to focus on, and then there's the background. Next, please. And then, of course, it's going to provide our students with the possibility to summarize and synthesize once they have stated relevance. So we are now moving on to the fourth question we are posing today. How does visual literacy enhance language and communication? But this is what the title of the presentation has anticipated. We have already defined visual literacy. We have already discussed why it matters. We have already spoken about the wonderful opportunities that visual literacy provides to develop thinking skills. And now we are moving on to the fourth question, in which my point is to show you, dear teachers, that if we include explicit work on visual literacy, not only will we be propelling thinking, but we will also be propelling communication and language. And we are language teachers, so that means it matters, and it matters a lot. Please, next slide. So let's see. I want you to pay attention and focus actually on the I am trying out your visual literacy skills here. Visual literacy and language have a very, very strong relationship, and I'm going to show you. Visual literacy starts with observation, starts with looking at. Now, if we are good observers, if we carefully pay attention to what we are looking at, something begins to happen. We start thinking about what we see. This means that we start making inferences, we start making connections, we start wondering. Can you please go back to the other slide? Thank you. We start wondering, connecting, relating personally with what we are looking at. But all that, my dear colleagues, happens in the minds of our students. Now, if our students want to share what's happening inside their minds as they are looking at the visuals, they will need to verbalize it. And for that, they need language. So there you go. What is language if it is not the verbalization of our thinking? And one of the wonderful things about visual literacy is that it teaches our students to critically think about what they see. So there you go. Next slide, please. So a minute ago, we were talking about these comprehension levels, remember? We were talking about the literal, the surface, the what can you see, the inferential level, which is what do you think about what you see, the emotional level, which is what do you feel about what you see, the critical level, which is what's your opinion about what you see, and the creative, which is the what now, or what can you actually transform this visual into. So again, we're paying attention in all these circles that are appearing now. You've got the thinking skills, connecting, making inferences, summarizing and synthesizing, making predictions, stating relevance, asking questions. And I don't know if you know this, using the senses, definitely. And I don't know if you know, my dear friends, but all these are the reading strategies per se needed to make a good understanding of a text. And they are also the reading strategies needed to understand the visual. But in order to share the connections you've made between your life and the photo, for example, in order to make inferences or share the inferences you've made, the conclusions, that relation between your thoughts and the visual, in order to share your predictions, in order to share the questions you're wondering, in order to do all this, you need language, which means that grammar, vocabulary, structural language become the means to an end. So, of course, visual literacy has a lot to do with language and communication. Next slide, please. And I want you to pay attention to what you've got on stage. Oh, hold on, please, hold on. I want you to pay attention to what you've got on the screen. We are language teachers, and we teach a language for communication. And one of the things we teachers want the most is that our students actually speak the language, that they communicate using the target language. And I want to push you now into thinking about something. What things do we do the most every day with language? But I'm not talking about English here. I'm talking about English, Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, whatever language. What functions do we fulfill the most every day? And what I'm going to be sharing now with you in a second are the language functions which, according to experts, are the one we use the most every day of our lives. So here we go. Every day, we tell. We tell anecdotes, we tell stories, we tell what has happened. Telling is one of the functions. What else do we do every day? Let's see. Every day we retell. We tell somebody else what happened in a conversation with somebody. We tell and we retell. What else do we do every day with language? Next, please. We narrate all the time. We are storytellers every day. We describe every day. We describe people, places, objects, situations. Every day we compare and contrast. What? People, places, situations, objects, food, clothes. What else do we do every day with language? Let's see. We give our opinion. We ask for opinions and we give opinions all the time. What else do we do with language every day, no matter the language? What else do we do? We ask questions and we answer questions every day, all the time. We agree and disagree as we are discussing or exchanging ideas with people. What else do we do every day? We react emotionally every time we are sharing our emotions, our feelings. And so if you pay attention, my dear friends, what you've got here on the screen are the language functions we use the most. And the most interesting thing about visual literacy is that visual literacy pushes our students to using all these functions of the language, because when I ask them to observe a visual with a lot of attention, they have the possibility to tell what they can see, they can retell something that comes to their mind after observing. They can narrate an anecdote or a connection or something that happened to them that is similar to what is being depicted in the picture. They can describe what's going on in the picture. They can compare and contrast what's going on in the image and their lives and other people and other situations. They can definitely give our opinion. So what I am saying here is visual literacy actually being taken into the language classroom provides unique opportunities for students to express themselves, to communicate. And it's meaningful because it's their own interaction with that visual. Next, please. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next slide. So this means that language is performative, people. We do things through language, and the fantastic thing is that visual literacy definitely provides very rich opportunities for this. Now we are moving on to another big question I said we would be addressing today, which is, how do we do it? Okay, we are all convinced. Now we understood what visual literacy is. We have already discussed why it matters. We have already come to realize that visual literacy is fantastic to promote not only thinking, but also language and communication. Now the question that remains is, how do we do it? How do we bring visual literacy development to our classroom? And I am writing here between brackets, virtual, because that's the contingency we are going through very unexpectedly this year. Next slide, please. So let me make an attempt at providing some practical ideas that I hope you can adopt and adapt. One of the first things that you can do as a teacher to develop visual literacy is teach visual literacy strategies, all right? Visual literacy strategies. Just like there are strategies that we use to decode a text, all right? We've got strategies to decode and make the most of our comprehension of images. And here are some very important things to know. We've got salience, vectors, contact, and power. Next slide, please. So salience is what part of the picture attracts our attention the most. This has to do with paying attention to color and shapes, characters, the perspective, the foreground, the background, and asking our students the question, why do you think the author, the photographer, the illustrator has chosen this part? And how does it affect the way we feel about what is happening in that illustration, photo, picture? Vectors. How do our eyes move across and around the picture to understand what is happening? Where do we look first? Does the eyeline of the characters have an effect on how, I don't know, have you ever seen a painting that seems to be following you as you move? This is the kind of analysis that we teach our students to do with vectors. Contact. Are the characters in the photo, illustration, drawing, are the characters looking directly at us, or are they looking anywhere else? And what effect does that have on how I feel about the photo, painting, illustration? And power. Who or what has the power in the image? What a critical question there we've got, don't we? Is the eye level high, low, or even? How are the shapes and the bodies and the objects and perspective organized to determine who has the power in an image? So if you pay attention, dear teachers, working on salience, vectors, contact, and power is so much more than asking, what can you see? Next slide, please. Another tip, by giving students time to slow look. Slow looking is a very interesting concept, and it has to do with actually teaching our students who live in an era in which everything is fast as it can be. It's teaching them to slow down, to carefully observe and look. And it follows the following routine. Look, okay, look, see, describe what you actually see, analyze it. When I am pushing my students into analyzing, I am telling them to start making connections. What's happening there as they are looking and seeing? And then, of course, making interpretations. And one of the fantastic things about interpretations is that the same photo, the same painting, the same illustration can trigger off a number of interpretations. The important thing here is to teach our students to account for what they say, to justify their interpretations. Please, next slide. C. By asking thought-provoking questions. And I think, dear teachers, that the challenge here, I think that we language teachers have always used photos, illustrations. We have always used books with very interesting covers. But you know what? I feel that most of the time, the question that we ask is, what can you see? Or mostly what we ask is, describe the picture. Now, what do we mean by thought-provoking questions? We definitely need to ask questions that move beyond the literal of an image, that crack the surface. Let's see, next slide, please. So this is moving into three domains: the affective and perceptual, the compositional and structural, and the critical and ideological. Okay, so if we go to the affective perceptual domain, the question is, how does the image make you feel? And why does it make you feel like that? What other images come to your mind when you look at this image? What personal relevance does this have for you? Okay, does this remind you of anything about your personal life? Okay, do you feel identified anyhow with the image? Does the image have a positive or a negative impact on you? When you go to the compositional and structural domain, we ask questions such as, what elements can you see in the foreground and in the background? What text accompanies the image? This is like paying attention to any caption or a title. How is the image composed or framed? What do you think is there beyond the frame? Because there's always more than meets the eye, all right? From what angle or point of view, okay, is the image presented to you, the reader? What parts of the image, okay, are centrally focused and which other are left as the periphery? And if we go to the critical and ideological, what's the message given to you? What's the intention of the photographer, the painter, the illustrator? Who created it? Okay. And in what form of media is this image created? Okay. Who is the possible audience for this? These are the questions that are really mind-blowing and that really push critical thinking skills. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you now some examples, all right? This is an example from a unit opener in a material, in a book from National Geographic Learning. Look at the name, all right, of the unit, the big picture. So we are using a title that is already igniting. We have a photograph which is of high impact, and then we've got a quote: everybody can be part of the solution if they want. So it's really critical to get started with discussions that are really going to allow our students to go beyond the what can you see. All right, next please. So questions such as, what are the people in the photo doing? And why might they be doing this? Think of a time when you needed someone else's help. People need help. So I am showing you how we are using here a photo to ignite deep connections between the viewer and the image. Next, please. Look at this one. Color matters. All right. Does it? Does it matter? Does it matter to you? What's the relationship between color and the life of our students? Please, next. And I want to tell you a short anecdote, but this is what, hold on, please. An image that I used for to trigger off a discussion with my students. And I asked them to look at the photo, and then I asked them, what can you see? All right. And the students were kind of describing what they could see. Before presenting the photo, I asked my students, how do you go to school every day? And they told me that they would go by bus and by car, on foot, by bicycle. And I even had a student who complained about having to go on foot to school. And then we read a text that went together with this image, in which our students learned that this is the way these kids go to school every day of their lives. And I remember when the class was over that one of the students said, you know what? I don't think I will ever complain about going to school on foot. That is empathy. Through photographs, through images, we can bring the world to the classroom and build on such important skills as empathy, for example. Next slide, please. I even will encourage you to develop visual literacy with very young students. Here's a very, very fun activity that I do with children. And I encourage them to look and say, well, if it is not a wave, then what is it? So students provide lots of very creative answers. If it is not a crown, then what is it? And you will be delighted to see the kind of answers that students will definitely bring to the classroom. Next, please. Now, another very good thing that you can do to enhance visual literacy in the classroom is to teach students to organize information and organize their thinking using graphic organizers, thinking maps, or templates. So a characteristic of our materials in National Geographic Learning, for example, is that we teach deliberately how to use graphic organizers, charts, thinking maps, for example, a Venn diagram, if you want to compare and contrast places, people, concepts. The theory behind graphic organizers is that they make thinking visible, all right? Everything that is going on in the mind, we can actually organize and make visible to ourselves and others. Next slide, please. And next. And of course, I will definitely invite you to use graphic organizers because it's not a matter of age. There are wonderful graphic organizers for students of all ages, like the I See, I Think, I Wonder, which is a fantastic routine to develop visual literacy. So students have to write here or discuss what they can see, all right, what they think about what they actually see, and also we push them to asking questions. And here, for example, picture analysis graphic organizer, the questions that come to your mind, all right? So on mute now. Ah, fantastic. Okay, so let us move on. I'm about to finish. How else can you work on visual literacy? Of course, by making the most of book illustrations, okay? Working with book illustrations is a fantastic opportunity. Work with the cover of the book and the illustrations of a book, okay? Next slide, please. I want you to see these fantastic graphic organizers that you can use with students of all ages. You can encourage them to preview, or as the previous speaker mentioned, you can engage students in skimming. Look at this fantastic worksheet. It's called Cover Walk and Preview. Read the title. Take a cover walk, observe carefully, look at the back cover as well, and then complete 3 things you learned as you were observing the cover. And you are also inviting your students to make a prediction. The fantastic thing is that when you encourage students to, hold on please, to preview, you are already engaging them in being curious about what they will be reading about. Next slide, please. Look at these visual literacy thinking routines, okay? I see, I think, I wonder, and we also teach our students the language for this. I see, I observe, there is, there are. I think, my opinion, I agree, I disagree, I wonder why, I wonder if, I wonder how. It's amazing to push our students into asking lots of questions. Next slide, please. I have made my own version of the I see, I think, I wonder routine, and I wanted to share it with you. It's called I see, I think, I wonder to begin with, but then I see, I think, I feel, so that they can express their feelings. I see, I think, I remember, so that they can make personal connections. I see, I think, I relate. I see, I think, I compare. This with other pictures, with an anecdote of my life. So the fantastic thing is that you can engage students in discussions, and the same stimuli can create lots of responses from our students. And of course, modeling this first, okay? You need to model it first. You need to show them how. Next slide, please. I love this question wheel. I always encourage students to pay a lot of attention to what they are observing. I encourage a lot of slow looking, and then I invite them to ask questions using who, why, where, how, what, when, what if, and then they bring the questions and we all together make attempts at answering them, discovering that probably for the same question we also have multiple answers. The fantastic thing about these ideas that I'm sharing with you today is that you can use them with a variety of visuals and with students of all ages. I forgot to say that, but you're going to have my email address at the end of the presentation, and if you want me to share the presentation and the graphic organizers with you, it will be my absolute pleasure. Let's move on, please. Next slide. I also love this graphic organizer. It's called Make Connections, okay? So students are going to choose the pictures, illustrations, or photos on a given page of the course book, for example, or on a given page in the reader they are dealing with, and then they are going to establish the personal connections they can make. Remember that there are 3 types of connections: the text with myself, the text with another text, and the text with my knowledge of the world. So this is a very good way of inviting our students to connect, to make connections. Next slide, please. I love this picture detective, okay? It's called Be a Picture Detective. Look at the picture or the illustration or the photo and think about what is activated in your schemata, maybe prior knowledge and experience, something that happened to you, and then you state your conclusion. This is a very good graphic organizer to teach our students to make good and thoughtful inferences. Next slide, please. Now, what else can you do to enhance visual literacy skills in your classes? Bring a variety of audiovisuals to the classroom. Work with photographs, with illustrations, with maps, with graphs, with infographics, with video, with drawings, with mind maps, with graphic organizers and commercials, with works of art, and you will have amazing opportunities to trigger your students' thinking and language skills. Next slide, please. So we are reaching conclusions so that we can leave some time for questions. Visual literacy matters more than ever in a visual world. We need to rethink the assignments we are engaging our students in. We need to ask more thought-provoking questions. We need to promote more thinking opportunities. We need to engage our students in more discussions, because when we teach visual literacy strategies, we promote thinking, language, and communication. And most importantly, visual literacy provides unique opportunities to develop 21st century skills: creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. Next slide, please. So remember that if you want a copy of the presentation, it will be my pleasure to share. Here is the bibliography that is backing up my presentation. And in the next slide, I'm going to be saying thank you, everybody, for joining me today. You've got my email address on the slide, fernandezluve@yahoo.com. Please make sure you write to me, you send me an email, and it will be my absolutely delight to share not only the presentation with you, but the graphic organizer and visual literacy ideas that you can adopt and adapt. So thank you very much, everybody. Time for questions and comments now, I guess. Hello, Fred. Thank you for being a perfect assistant today.
Thank you very much, Miss, for you. And well, yes, as you mentioned, we collected some comments and some questions. So the first question is from Jenny Faustino. She has two questions. The first question is this: do you know platforms or virtual tools to practice more about reading? This is one of them. And the second one is, how can I encourage my student to use more thinking skills?
Well, I think there is a quote from Vygotsky that says that our students are educated in the environment we promote. So what I strongly believe in is that we have to develop critical thinking skills day after day. We have to teach explicitly all these skills. We have to model them, and we have to make sure that our students have daily opportunities to use them. Because when opportunities are daily, we build cognitive habits. So this is not going to be overnight, dear teachers. We will have to teach it. We will have to model it. It's going to be difficult at the very beginning, but if we constantly promote it, it's going to become a habit for the brain. All right. So it's about explicitly teaching. I see that somebody's mentioning Project Zero. Exactly. All these ideas have a lot to do with Project Zero from Harvard University. It has to do with slow-looking, visible thinking routines, making visible what's happening in our heads.
Excellent. Next question is from Nick. Nick said, if we focus on visual literacy when we lose the enjoyment and beauty of reading novel?
Oh no. Oh no. Visual literacy is a complement to traditional literacy. I am a literacy trainer. I would never, ever, ever, not in my wildest dreams, suggest that we stop working with texts. What we have to understand, and that's a very interesting question, is that because our students live in a digital world, the concept of literacy has become plural. Today, we talk about literacies. We've got the traditional literacy having to interact with a text, but one of the literacies, we've got digital literacy, we've got visual literacy. This is one more literacy to develop. The concept of literacy changes with the formats of information our students access.
Thanks. And the other one is the nickname says Chucky, but it's not a name.
Oh my goodness.
So the question is this: how does the age of our pupils influence on the understanding of written text? Not all of them can make inferences.
Well, actually, you would be surprised to see what research says. Inference is not a matter of age, all right? Children make lots of inferences, all right? The thing is that they make probably easier or more predictable inferences. I have a lot of material, if you happen to be interested, working with images with the children to teach them inference. So for example, I can show them a flashcard where there is a baby that is crying, and in the background there's the bottle of the baby on the floor. So I ask the children, what can you see? A baby. And what is the baby doing? The baby is crying. Why do you think the baby is crying? The one who pays attention to the bottle will say, probably because he wants to drink the bottle. So these are very simple and predictable inferences. As students cognitively develop, they will make, of course, more complex inferences. But if you're interested, because you work with young children, please do write to me. I see that a lot of people have missed my email address. So I was wondering if when we finish with the questions, we can show the last slide again. Fred, do you think you can be so kind?
Yeah, at the end, we're going to try to show. And the other question is from Gonzalo Concha. How do you assess visual literacy?
Well, you assess visual literacy by paying attention to the students' justifications of their answers. That is why visual literacy is so much more than what can you see. If I ask you, what do you see? And I show you the photo of a lion in the savannah, and then you tell me that you see a lion, I am just assessing your sight. But if I ask you, what does this remind you of? What do you connect with? Or what do you already know about this? I am assessing your capacity to relate personally with the image you are looking at, and I am assessing the kind of connections that you can actually make. If you are interested, once again, I can send you some very good checklists to actually assess our students' capacity to justify the answers they give as they answer our thought-provoking questions.
Excellent. And last but not least, this is a comment from Chris Simons. With a shift from print-based media to digital visual, there is also a shift in attention span that is very difficult to adapt to, especially now with online education. Any comment? Any agree, disagree with this comment?
Oh, absolutely. How could I disagree if it is so true? This is why I was mentioning before how important it is. An aspect of visual literacy happens to do with slow looking, precisely because, as you very well said, our students' attention span has become an issue, and Another topic for discussion, which we are not going to engage now in, happens to do with classroom management in a virtual environment, for example, and how important it is that we teach them to minimize distractions. When we push them into slow looking, we really want them to slow down, forget about the rest, and focus on what's happening between them and the photo. It's not going to be easy at all, but it's really, really, really worth the effort.
Thank you very much, Miss. So please don't forget, team, don't forget to show up again the last slide for the email, because they were like asking some attendees. Come on up, please. Can you show up the last slide, please? We're right away. Tim, you can hear me? I think right away it's gonna be like gonna pop up.
Okay. I can.
Before going that one, Miss, any comments? Just to finish this presentation.
I would like to thank everybody and again encourage you to please write to me. There it is. Okay, there it goes. It is Fernandez, like my surname, LUVE @yahoo.com. Please make sure you write to me and I will be more than happy to share anything you might need and even answer any question that we didn't have the time to discuss now. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, SBS. And thank you, of course, National Geographic Learning for sponsoring my talk.
Thank you very much, Miss. We really appreciate for your presentation. Well, we have one more presentation, please. Anything else? That's it? Well, ongoing with the agenda, we welcome to TDC to Oxford University Press editorial, and let's have a little bit more information about a publisher. And so we invite you to watch a short video. Please, let's go with a video.
We are the world's largest university press.
We are over
6,000 people worldwide.
Na nakaaabot sa bawat sulok ng mundo.
संतानवे भाषाओं में. We are part of Oxford University and we are active in education, research and the learning of English.
Education gives the children a wider perspective. It's a joyous process.
There are billions of people looking to learn English in order to improve their lives.
It is very important for new ideas and new research to be published and made known.
AUP has an outstanding reputation, and I think they're hugely well respected. We work with big tech companies, developers, and others to make sure that the rich tapestry of language is reflected in people's digital lives.
We believe that education changes and makes a difference in people's lives.
This is our passion.
And our motivation for everything we do.
It's our DNA.
Education is the key to life. You can do whatever you want to do. It breaks the boundaries.
All right. Let's say. Now, please, let me introduce our third speaker of the morning, renowned specialist and consultant Philip Haynes, on the topic tips and tricks for online teaching. Well, short information about him, please. Philip is originally from England, but he has been living in Mexico since 1995. He is an author, co-author on several ELT series published in Mexico, and speaks at ELT events all over Mexico as well as internationally. Philip works as a senior academic consultant for Oxford University Press, Mexico. Please, this is the last but not least, welcome Philip to TDC. Good morning, Philip. This
Good morning.
is all of you, please.
Can I just check that you can hear me first? Can you hear me okay? If you could just tell me in the chat. Because if you can't hear me, we are in trouble. I can't see anything in the chat. Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay. So, good morning. Thank you very much for putting up my slides. Hang on a second. How do we do this? Let me just check. So, this platform is new for me, so I may struggle with it a little bit. This is all part of online teaching, getting to know your platforms. Good, great. So, good morning. I am in Mexico City, so the time is still morning. Can you tell me in which country you are? Don't tell me the city because I won't know all of the cities. I wonder if you can tell me. In Peru. I wonder if the chat is going to be going slowly. I don't know how quick the chat is going to be going. I wonder where people are today. So yes, so good morning, welcome, or good afternoon, because I believe there are people not just in the morning. Some of you have already arrived to the afternoon, if I am correct. So, here it comes. Seems to be a little slow. Okay, this is one of the things we need to put up with, I think. Let me just play around with this. I need to organize my screen. Very good. Peru, lots of people from Peru, perhaps not everybody. Okay, so is Peru better than Mexico? Mexicans would say differently. Oh, in Spain, all countries have their benefits and their disadvantages. And all countries are wonderful in one way or another. So, okay, let's get started. My name is Philip Haynes. Welcome, everybody. The topic is tips and tricks for online teaching. And I want to just first of all look at how I'm working with this. I'm going to be using a PowerPoint, but I don't like using PowerPoints in full screen. I'm not doing that today. I'm using it in normal mode. In that way, I have a lot of advantages of how I can work with this, and I can also see my chat. And for me, the chat is perhaps one of the most useful elements that we can ever have in online teaching. I like to have it completely open, and I want to be able to see what you're typing. Typically, if we're doing it in full screen mode, in presentation mode, depending on what platform you're using, it will change how you can see the chat. So I like to work in this particular way, and I'm going to be managing my slides. So this is not presentation mode, this is normal working mode, and I'll show you a couple of things about why I like to work this way. Okay, I have a structure for this session. All teachers produce lesson plans, sometimes written down, sometimes just in their head. And I think a good structure is a very important thing to have. If you've got a structure, you can work quite well, and you can always move away from your structure if it's not working for you. Good, brilliant. Oh, from towns I do not know in Peru. Anybody from another country? I saw from Spain. That's fantastic. So this is my structure. So I want to start first of all with your concerns about online teaching. Look at planning and structuring an online lesson. Look at teaching a lesson. I want to look at some ideas of how we might work with a lesson, some general suggestions and questions at the end. There will be a 10-minute section for questions at the end. But if you have any questions, please do type them. It may be going quite quickly. This is the problem of doing, if the group is very large, it's very difficult to track all of the chat. If you're working with a regular class of 20, 30, 40 students, it's much easier for you to be able to see what is happening inside the chat. So, from Bolivia, I've never been to Bolivia. Would love to go one day, hopefully. So any questions you have, put them in. Freddie apparently will be collecting questions, which we will look at the end. But if you put something in, I will respond to things that I can see. So your concerns about online teaching, and I want to start by looking at the Common European Framework of Reference, the CEFR. From Brazil. I don't know if my chat is going slowly. If my chat is going slowly, it will change the dynamics a little bit. Can you just tell me yes or no? Are you familiar with the Common European Framework? If you can tell me yes or no. This will also give me an indication of whether my my chat is going fast or not, because this does change the dynamics. You are a lot of people. Yeah, that's probably going to change the dynamics, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, okay. This is a problem, perhaps. No, it does coming through. So the question was, are you familiar with the Common European Framework? And I've got answers coming through saying, yes. I don't expect everybody knows it. It is called the Common European Framework. It is a framework developed for use initially in Europe, but it's used around the world. And we have these different levels. Yeah. Okay. And I've also put down the Common European Framework names, and I've also numbers, the A1, A2, B1, B2, but also sometimes they're called elementary, pre-intermediate, intermediate, upper intermediate. Okay, a question. And this, well, no, I'm not going to ask a question because I think the chat might be going a little bit slow, and I need to make sure that I'm not confusing people. Okay, the CEFR of technology, this is what I've put on the screen. In fact, the CEFR of technology is something which does not exist. This is my own invention. Essentially, what I'm doing is using the Common European Framework as a way to talk about teachers' ability to use technology. So, is there a tip? Not yet. Well, one tip is always have the chat box open, Arthur. That is, but tips are coming. Yes, if the CEFR were a description of ELT technological ability, what would your level be? So there's a question for you. And if you can just type in the A1, B2, C2, A2, those different letters, depending how fast the chat is going, because if it is going very slow, it does change the dynamic. And as I said, I'm not familiar with this platform. This is the first time I've used this particular platform. And every single time you use a different platform, you get a different thing. So it is coming through. Good. So Ingrid, C1, Natalie, B1. Here it comes. People are saying C1. If you've got a C1 level or a B2 level, that is absolutely fantastic. It means that you've got a certain proficiency with technology. You can do a number of things. But I wonder, is everybody a B2, C1? Fanny says B, that could be B1, B2, or halfway between. Veronica says a B1. Well, let me tell you, I consider myself, please keep it coming. No, there's the level of the student's technological ability, and there's the level of you as a teacher. I'm thinking about you as a teacher. Yeah, I consider myself to be somebody who has a B1 level of technological ability. I don't use Facebook. It stresses me. I'm not on social media. I don't take a lot of camera photos with my phone. I don't really have a very good relationship with technology. And one of my points here is that a lot of teachers are going to be in a situation where you don't feel like, Chris, it's like B1. If you're at that kind of level, you probably don't feel very confident with technology. You probably feel that you're struggling a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. My whole premise for this session is that if you are not very, very good with technology. There are still many things you can do within the level you are. I don't want to stress people out. I remember taking a course some years ago about technology in English language teaching, and I came out of the course so depressed because I realized that I did not have any of those skills or those abilities. And Danielle, A2. Yeah, good. Thank you for being honest. Yes, the ones who are B1, B2, C1, boom, very quick to respond. But if you have a low level, it does not matter. It does not matter, right? But if, like Frank says, if you got a C1 level, and Vasia says a C1 level also, you're gonna notice that you're going to. I mean, if you've got that level, fantastic. But if you haven't got that level, there are still many things you can do with working within the technology you already have. So. Yes, Isabel, technology A2. Yeah, so you can't do all the whistles and bells and the tricks. You don't have apps. You can't skip between screens. You don't need to. It's good if you can. You will learn, but don't feel depressed if you can't do that. Good. Again, I'd like you to use the chat, and I always like to have the chat open. I mean, I think that the chat is one of the most democratic things we have in online learning. If you want to keep your students engaged, giving them a voice, allowing them to put things in the chat. Yes, struggling with technology. Could schools offer courses to teachers? I think that's very good, but who has the expertise? Yeah, I mean, we've all been chucked into this environment where the most of us are actually teaching online, and we're not prepared for this, and we are going to be struggling. So here's a question for you. What are your greatest concerns about online teaching? Again, I'd like you to work in the chat. I'd like you to type in, and I need to give you a little bit of time to type. If I'm asking you a question which requires slightly longer answers, it is very important you give students time. Time to answer. Yeah, don't rush your students. And in a face-to-face class, you can ask a question and get a response quite quickly. Enough time, keeping students interacting. Yes, you can learn a lot by checking. There's lots of stuff online that you can actually work with. Oh, I can read Spanish, but I can't read that quickly. Attention span of the kids. Don't feel comfortable with technology. Elena, if you're not comfortable with technology, work within what you are. And if you have a teenager, use your teenager. If you have colleagues who know more than you, ask them. Do not be afraid of doing that. I mean, like, you need to ask. You can ask YouTube in many occasions, making them enjoy learning, paying attention, or having the necessary tools. The delay in presentations, this is to do with internet speed and things like that. Yes, certain technological things. With technology, my own view is, okay, I know how to do this. If there's a technological problem, it's out of my hands. Don't get too stressed. How can you make it active? Oh, it's going too quickly. Oh, 80 students online, 40 minutes with teenagers. I'm going to show you a number of activities which are very short and very simple, which I think you will be able to see that working with the chat box will allow you to do some of these things. Students don't participate. Yeah, in a face-to-face class, there are ways of making students participate. 100 students. The thing is, in an online class, you can have more students than you can fit into a regular classroom. Yeah, not achieving the goal of the lesson. But, Gracie, do you always achieve the goal in a face-to-face lesson? Depends how experienced you are as a teacher, yeah? Okay, good. Thank you very much for your participation. Connectivity. Then there's a suggestion coming later for connectivity. Well, we'll come to that a bit later. So brilliant. Thank you very much for your participation. I honestly believe that the culture of the chat box is one of the best things. I think I have a higher level of engagement because I'm allowing you to work there and responding to what students say. And it's going very fast, and I'm not always able to work with that. Plus, I am also dyslexic and I can't read quickly. Or feeling if students accept you as engaging, exciting as social media, gaming, etc. You're never going to be as exciting as a game, as the gaming experience, because a gaming experience has millions of dollars behind it with experts. You are who you are. You can't compete with that. I think how you can compete with them is the way that you structure a class and your teaching skills. Okay, so I've been working with a lot of teachers over the last 25 years, but in the last 6 months particularly, looking at the problems that we're facing in this kind of environment. I'm still learning how this chat works. It does different things. Every platform is different. Right. So I've been working with a lot of teachers. I am struggling with the platform, but don't worry about that, you know? I mean, little by little, it doesn't matter. Managing technology. The reason I start by asking you about your technological ability is you are where you are. You know, oh, I want to be a C1 level in technology. Well, if you're an A2 level in technology, that's where you are. Your next goal is to just move up slowly, get a bit better with certain things. Motivation. I'm going to come to that one. Yes. Yeah. So technology, you are where you are. Go on to YouTube, check videos, ask other colleagues, see what you can do. You know, just improve a little bit. Yeah. Don't try to do everything at once. Work with what you've got. And for me, working with PowerPoint in this particular way, it gives me a lot of flexibility, and I can move between my slides. I can also use it. Let me just show you. I can also use it as I am dyslexic, I can't write quickly. As a whiteboard. I can actually now, and it actually really, let me see if I can do this. See if this works. Is it going to work? No, that did not work. Oh, wow, that was crazy. Okay, I believe in some platforms you can paste things across. That did not work as I thought it was going to do. So I'm going to cut that one out and go back. Yeah, you see, I'm trying things out. As I said, I'm not amazingly technologically advanced, but you can actually, in some platforms, copy things across to your slides, use your slides as a whiteboard. Don't pay attention to the... I've been told not to pay attention to the chat. I believe, okay, this is a slightly bigger group than normal, right? I do personally believe that as a teacher, you do need to be paying attention to the chat. I don't know how many people are in the room, and I do sometimes get distracted, but I believe that you as a teacher in your regular classrooms should be paying attention to the chat and what people are actually saying, because it gives them a voice. So Ross, yes, I agree, and I do get distracted, but I do believe I do need to pay attention to what my participants are saying. Getting students to speak is another thing that people mention sometimes. In a regular face-to-face class, you can ask the student something, they will speak back. But in this kind of environment, it's more difficult to get students to speak. My suggestion would be to turn a lot of the speaking activities into writing activities. Sometimes as teachers, we don't give enough practice in writing. Writing is not speaking, but it is a productive skill, and it will develop grammar, confidence, and it will get your students working. Engagement and motivation, people mentioned this, yeah? Yeah, I was anticipating that you might ask me which is the best platform to work with. There is no correct answer to that, but I think Zoom is probably the easiest to work with and the most friendly from the beginning. Yes, Natalie, yes, the chat box, an open chat box. I've spoken to many people. And the consensus seems to be that when it's shy students actually kind of blossom a bit more in this environment because they have a voice, they feel less intimidated, they don't mind writing. You can actually type and check and feel comfortable before sending it. And as a dyslexic person, I don't mind people making typos. If students are typing in the chat and typing incorrectly, everybody does it. You know, trying to type things very quickly is really kind of complicated in a way. So how to engage students? An active chat, a democratic chat, a chat where you are not kind of dominating your students, or, you know, oh, you spelled that incorrectly. No, none of that. Let them communicate. And I feel there's quite a lot of people writing. I see lots of names coming up. And another thing that often comes up is the idea of assessment. We can't do the regular, you know, printed test inside the classroom. We do need to rethink how we're going to do our assessment. And in fact, this actually probably gives us more opportunities of how we might be working. So these are 4 concerns. There are other concerns, but these are things that come up again and again and again. I'm not good with technology. Well, you're at the level you are, work with what you've got. How do you engage your students? Chat is the easiest tool to engage your students from the beginning. Okay, yes, I shall move on and not get distracted. I always get distracted. Okay, I want to move on to the second part, which is planning and structuring a lesson. And you've probably heard about these 2 words more over the last 6 months than before. This idea of synchronous and asynchronous learning or teaching. If you know this, great. If you don't, I shall show it to you. So synchronous learning is, synchronous means happening or existing at the same time. And this is essentially what we're very familiar with. A regular classroom is synchronous learning. Students come into the classroom and, you know, the learning and the teaching are happening at the same time. And that's what we do in a lot of online classes. So now students cheat easily. Well, you need, we're not really going to go into that topic. There are different ways of working around with that, but that is another topic for another day. Right, asynchronous. Yeah, participation in the class, the chat box is perhaps the best tool we have. I think the chat box is something that we don't have in a regular classroom, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I think we're going to miss it when we go back to regular classes. So asynchronous, not happening or existing at the same time. And we've been doing this for a long time. So we give a regular class and we give students homework. That's asynchronous learning. But I want you to think about a model. You may have heard of this before. You may have worked with this before, flipped learning or the flipped classroom. Instead of just, you know, giving the class and then giving follow-up, which is the homework, we can think in another way, which is to give students work before coming to class. People were saying not enough time. I mean, I've worked with thousands of teachers over, well, in my, yes, going into my 4th decade, if you do the mathematics in that particular way, or my 3rd decade. And I've lost my track. This is what happens to me. It's having a dyslexic brain, I think. The way we typically work is teach the lesson, give the homework. All teachers I talk to, the thousands of teachers I've spoken to, all say that we don't have enough time to give a class. Then stop thinking so much about homework, but think about assigning things before coming to class. Franco, yes, record their voice and check their pronunciation. In fact, if students have a cell phone, a regular one, you can do so many things with this. Ask students to practice the new vocabulary by speaking it into Google voice recognition and seeing if it throws up logical results for that kind of stuff. For assessment, why not get them to do things like voice recording a little presentation or a video recording a presentation, something like that. But an idea I want to move on to, in fact, that's coming up in the next section, is some suggestions. And one thing I think you should try to do is train your students to do listenings before coming to the classroom. People were saying there's bad connectivity in certain parts of the world. If you've got bad connectivity, a listening is not going to work very well across an interactive an internet class like this. If you get students to do the listening before coming to the class, they're more likely to listen to it twice, ask questions, maybe check the audio script, and then when you come to the class, you're not doing the listening, you're working on the comprehension of the listening and going into the language. Yeah. And a lot of publishers, I mean, my publisher is Oxford. We have made available the audios for the teachers and for the students. Flipping the classroom. I used to be frustrated with the flipped classroom model. It used to be don't get distracted by the chat. I was told not to do that. I lose my track. Yes. Okay. So yeah, I used to get really frustrated with the flipped classroom model. You know, these beautiful things, oh, do this, make a video for your students. We don't have time. But if we ask them to, and we train them, we will need to train them. If we ask them to do that before coming to the class, train them little by little over several months, weeks, then, you know, they're building up some autonomy, and then they're coming to the class with questions. We're not just testing them inside the classroom. Oh, musics. Boom. Roberto says, example of music in English class could be, why not ask your students, choose your favorite song, tell me the link for the video on YouTube, and then say why it's your favorite song. And that can be done exclusively outside the classroom. And then the students are coming in and hopefully will have been able to see other people's videos, and then you discuss why they like it. Okay, changing the dynamic as more frequent. I think we need to change the dynamic more often in this kind of environment. How can we engage students? Okay, giving them a voice, allowing them to work in the chat is one thing. Changing the dynamic quite frequently. There's a number of little things you can do, some kind of very quick activities. I want to do one now, see if the chat is going to work with me. Can I ask you, everybody is sitting in front of a computer, I imagine, or a phone, or an iPad, or something like that. Can you type into the chat, can you tell me something you can see from your computer? Not your computer, but something you can see from your computer. So can you type into the chat something you can see from your computer? Depends how quickly the chat is going today. It does depend. Another tip while that's coming through, try to look into the camera of your computer. It gives the impression that you are looking at your students. I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at the camera, but it gives them more, it changes the dynamic. A tree, a door. Okay. A TV. I don't know if you're watching it on a TV. Aha. Curtains. A can of paint. Oh, I can see cans of paint as well. My office has got cans of paint in the corner curtain. A farm. Ah, I've got no windows in my room. I can see cans of paint. I can see a Donald Duck lamp. Yeah. So what you're doing is you're activating vocabulary. A kitchen, Natalie. A bookcase. I can see a bookcase. But let me see if I can try this again. Let's try this. This is something, I think I did it wrong last time. Yes. Ah, look at this. Look at this. what you can do, and how quickly you can do this, see how I can do this. And this is a great way of collecting vocabulary, right? It's going too quick, but you see what I've done. I've used my PowerPoint presentation, which is open in normal mode, and I've collected it and I'm using it as a whiteboard. My naughty cat, my photo, vocabulary. And what are you talking about? You're talking about yourselves, your environment, no? Yeah? Isn't that not very simple? Very, very simple. Yeah, and I've used my slide as a whiteboard so I can see my chat. It's a dynamic space. I've got my slides. I can go up and down on my slides as I wish. Brains get bored if you talk for more than 20 minutes. Yeah, and I don't know if you use whiteboards. There are many different options for whiteboards. You can actually have a physical, let me see if I can see my camera because I can't do that. Yes, a physical whiteboard. You can write things on it, or you can use the whiteboards that you have in your within the platform. Or I personally like just to I just like to have the PowerPoint presentation open. I mean, you don't have to use PowerPoint, but then if you've got it open in this mode, you can work in different ways. Good, brilliant. So changing it, yeah. Oh, images. Images are absolutely brilliant. I don't use a lot of images because of copyright. It takes an incredibly long time. I will be using some images. I use images from our books because we have rights to those images, but you do need to be careful if you are working in an environment like this, where it's going to be recorded or might be published somewhere. If I'm using images which I do not have rights to, I can get into trouble. Planning your questions carefully. Every single teacher needs to plan their questions very carefully, but it is great things coming in the chat. I hope you're looking at what other people are saying. Every teacher does need to plan their questions very, very carefully, but it's more so, it's more important inside this environment. And we're going to come to some examples in a minute. We're going to do some examples. So plan your questions very, very carefully. Put them clearly. You can even then do the same thing again. I could open up another slide and I could type my question. I'm not going to do that. Keep your students active. People are giving suggestions. I hope you're following suggestions that other people are saying, because this is an opportunity for you to share with each other. Yeah. And I personally think the classrooms that I like most, the online classes, are the ones where the students are communicating with each other. It's not just the tutor communicating with the students communicating with the tutor, or vice versa. Yeah, keep your students active. Oh yes, there are places to get images, but it's so much work. And honestly, how much time do we have? Do we have enough? Do we have 5 minutes to find that image? And I do agree, images are absolutely beautiful and great. I don't use them because of time restrictions and stuff like that. Empower your students. I'm trying to empower you a little bit. I mean, I don't know you. It's not going to work. It's the same in this environment as in a regular environment with your students that you know, but I want you to participate. I want to give you some power. And I'm going to move on to this section. We're going to do some activities. So teaching a lesson. How can I teach you how to teach a lesson in just a few minutes? I can't really do that, but what I can do is give you some suggestions. Right, I'm going to use a couple of pages from a book, which is from Oxford. It's called Oxford Discover. It's chosen pretty much at random. You're still answering questions from before. That's fine. I like it. It doesn't have to be, we're doing this, now we're doing this. The chat should be a democratic space where people can put things as they come through. So I'm going to be using these 2 pages. I'm going to work mostly with this one. And here is an activity. Adjust my headphones. Lots of people are putting in nice things into the chat. I think you should be looking at those as well. Here is an activity. It's a very simple activity. It's about colors. It says, listen and point to the words. Well, that is a classroom-based activity. You know, that doesn't really work online. Listen again and say the words. Well, in a regular classroom, we can, you know, play the audio, everybody repeats, we can hear them. That doesn't work in the same way in this kind of environment. So I want to give you some suggestions of what you might do. And my first suggestion is use things like this. Now, because I have numbered the colors, the dynamic can change very dramatically. Okay, this is a first grade activity, but I hopefully you can see how you can change this to this kind of dynamic to work with other levels and with other vocabulary. But this is a very simple activity to show you that you can do some things which are incredibly simple. So we're going to do a number of activities, and I want you to help me. So I'm going to start, and then you're going to join in. Okay, what number is purple? First time you do this, it doesn't work perfectly, but hopefully you'll get the idea in a minute. So what number is purple? Can you type into the chat? And again, I don't know if the chat is going slowly. You know, these are things that we can't control, yeah? Ah, Ingrid was the first one in there, yeah? Okay, anybody else? The idea here is that what we're asking the students to do, yes, now they're coming. You know, we've got a 1-digit response. So it's not high stress, but everybody can participate. And it is working with, okay, am I working with colors or am I working with simple present questions? In fact, yes, I'm doing vocabulary, which is the colors, but really what I'm actually doing is simple present questions. Right, what number is yellow? And I've got to give you some time to type, and I've got to give you time for the technology to catch up. Yeah. I've still got lots of 5s coming through. Let me say the question again. What number is yellow? Ingrid was the first one again. I don't know if that's just because you've got a very fast internet connection, possibly. Yeah. Yeah, you see, okay. And my point is, once students are familiar with this in a smaller class, and if they've got microphones they can open, and we can't do this in this environment because this platform is not designed for this, what we can do is we can then get the students to ask those questions. I'm not going to do it here because the technology doesn't allow that interaction and the room is too big, but what do you think? Do you think your students would enjoy, once they become familiar with the question, do you think they would enjoy being able to ask the question, not to you, the teacher necessarily, but to the other students? So my point here is getting students to speak, show them the activity, give them the model, and then give them the power that they can ask this question. Okay, I think the chat is going a little bit slow to make this work, but look at this. You can change it around. It's not exactly the same thing. Yeah, there's a lag. Yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah. What color is number? Yeah. And again, what I would like students to do is to ask. I would practice that with the students, and then I would get the students. You know, who wants to volunteer? Raise your hand. Okay, Juanita, can you ask that question? And they participate. Stop doing the work yourself. So let's see if the chat is coming through quick enough. What color is number? No, in fact, no, let's do this. Yes. What color is number 4? They could do it in a breakout room as well. And people are suggesting different apps and sites that you can use in order. Ingrid, you seem to have the fastest internet connection. That's why you always come through first. Not because Ingrid is necessarily good, though she probably is, but that's not, yeah? Yeah, you see? Okay, let's move through. My favorite colors are, and here we're practicing, you know, a lot of grammar. So can you type in, what are your favorite colors? What are my favorite colors are, da-da, da-da. Can you type those in? And then what's happening is the students are then using information from the other students. No, I think you have a fast internet connection, Ingrid, but you probably are good as well, yeah? So, the idea here is that, Maria Isabel, you've actually changed my activity, yeah. You've actually saying pale green. You've actually gone further than the original vocabulary. But here, I'm asking the students to say what their favorite colors are. And you're actually doing like a poll. It's the students' information. You know, ask me, teacher. Brilliant. Henan, blue and green. Brilliant. Yellow and green. Da, 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 da. Yeah? Who's doing the work? The students. And then I could ask them, the chat is going too slowly today, but I could ask them, okay, so what are the most popular colors? Yeah, and that all of that information is coming from the students. And if you've got microphones, open the microphones. Juan, much more effective because of the numbers 2 and 6, red and black. Ta-da! That's very effective, Juan Carlos. Yeah, who's doing all the work? And sorry, I need to calm down, drink some coffee. Stop getting excited. When students become familiar with this, then they can take this on. They can ask these questions in the chat or in breakout rooms. You see, and it's very simple material. Okay, a couple more. I'm going to ask you a question. I know I still have other answers coming from other questions because the internet is a little bit slow, yeah? Maybe that's my fault, maybe that's Mexico's fault, who knows? A question. See if you understand this. How much is blue and brown? How much is blue and brown? So I do need to give some time because I think the internet is a little bit slower than I would like, maybe because that's the number of people inside the room. But my question was, how much is blue and brown? Ingrid, you got beat by Freddie, but then Freddie is in the room. Okay, right. Can I ask you? This is not going to work perfectly because there are too many people. Can you ask the same question? Can people ask the question and I will respond to your questions? So I'm your student. Yeah, you are the teachers, I am the student. Can somebody ask the question, how much is and can you type that into the chat? As 3710, 3710. Yes, exactly. Yes. Good. But who's doing all the work? Well, I'm doing a bit of the work, but you guys are doing a lot of the work as well. So can you type in how do you build up confidence? By giving them activities. I mean, if you give them these questions, you work with these questions for a few minutes, you do some modeling, you do a little bit of pronunciation, and then you encourage the more confident students to have a go, you know, little by little. Dalilia. How much is green and purple? How much is green and purple? 11. How much is green and white? 12. John. Oh, how much is 5 and 1? Nancy, you're doing it very well. Well, that is, yeah, that's changed it slightly. Yeah. How much is blue and white? Blue and white is 11. No? Yes. How much is and now what, Gina, you're doing something different from what I asked you to do. But is that bad? Yeah. How much is blue and 5? Oh, very nice, Freddie. You changed the dynamics again. You know, this fascinates me. Blue and 5 is 8. Yes? Yes. Do you see my point? Do you see the point I'm trying to make? Okay, one last one. Okay, I'm not going to stop you now because everybody's... you know, you have a certain amount of power. The last one, and I want you to type in some of your suggestions. I'll give you an example. What color is under number 2? Anna, how much is purple times green? Oh God. 20, Anna, is that correct? You're going to have to tell me. Do you see what's happening? This is such a simple thing, but no, I can't stop you. I mean, there was a question coming. What number is under number 2? Is black. Yes, 6 or black, the correct answer. Can somebody else, can you type in some answers? Oh, 3 times green. 12. Janet. Yes. And what's actually happening is that, you know, you are the students are getting you doing something. You're empowering them to do certain things. Yeah. So hopefully you can see. Yeah, no, I can't stop you. I don't have time to respond to these. I've given you like 5 different examples of what you might do with this simple thing. So simple, so beautiful. Simplicity is so complex. This is something. What number is opposite 8? Ooh, 1. Okay, stop being distracted, but don't stop yourself being distracted. These are coming from the students. Cynthia, so simple, right? Yeah. And I've seen lots of, you know, typing mistakes. It's about communication. I mean, we get a lot of opportunities to get them to write. It's a speaking activity, really, but turned into a writing activity. But we can get students to, you know, raise their hand and take the opportunity to take the role, and then that can, yeah. And Priscilla, who is doing the work? And you've also already started doing more things. Exactly. Yes, you've already put in the superlatives and the superlatives. Not really going to have time to look at this one. A reading. Okay, reading aloud. You could ask students to open the microphones and read different bits. You can do different actions. Out in the garden, up in the tree. There are 6. And then you have to find something red. Yeah, butterflies. Can you see? You know, simple little things like that. Okay, I'm not really going to have time to go into that because I'm going to run out of time otherwise. Yeah, so my point is, I mean, I'm not particularly brilliant with technology, but what really interests me is how a regular teacher can make small changes, change of mindset a little bit, and you know, do you see what happened? Do you see what happened throughout that activity? Or what color is between? Alan, I don't have time to answer your question, but I'm excited by it. Yes, yeah, I'm a 52-year-old person, and I've realized that simplicity is incredibly complicated to achieve. But I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Okay, right. I think I've got 10 minutes, and then we're going to do 10 minutes of questions. Some general suggestions just to kind of wrap up this section. 3 different things here. 3 general suggestions. I will explain each one and give you some ideas. Work less. Use what you already have. A lot of, I mean, I know that most of you have spent hours producing material for an activity that takes 10 minutes. We do this. We're teachers. This is one of the things that we like to do, no? But, you know, you've got your book. If you're using a book, use that. There's lots of stuff in it. A little bit of creativity, and you don't have to have the creativity steal the ideas from other people. You've joined this session today. Hopefully I can give you some simple things you can do. And those activities I gave you are designed, that book is designed for 7-year-olds. But I think you can see how you can do that with any set of vocabulary just by putting in the numbers. Use what you already have. You know, you've got the audio, you've got the video, there's lots of resources there. Your publisher, I know that Oxford University Press does this. We give you lots of, I'm going to come to more questions later. We do give you lots of stuff. Use it in a slightly creative way. Yeah, don't feel you need to create lots of stuff. And if you're not technologically advanced, you know, you're not naturally going to go to those apps or do that kind of stuff. Use what you've got. Use it in a simple way. Whiteboards are really useful things. Build routines into your classroom. Yeah. If you ever watch kindergarten classes or you're a kindergarten teacher, you know that routines are the thing that drive the class. When your students know what they're doing, they will happily try things out. So quickly, an idea of a quick routine. I want you to, I'm going to bring in another slide and do my whiteboard. Okay. I'm not a fast typer. Okay, right, quickly, in the chat box, if you prefer cats, write the letter C, whichever way it is on your camera, and if you prefer dogs, write the letter D. Get the students to do most of the work, not you. So this is a very simple thing, you know, an energizer. Yeah. Again, the chat may have gone slow. So if you prefer cats, can you write the letter C into the chat box? Just checking my things here. Ah, here it comes. Veronica, you're the first one. You prefer dogs. Boom. D. Yeah. Bridget, I'm dyslexic. I can't read names. Bridget, probably. Yeah. You said both. Yes. It is one or the other, but you can decide what you want. You see what the thing is, you know, just, you know, if you set these things up, do you prefer apples or bananas? Do you prefer sunny days or rainy days? Do you prefer mountains or beach? No, these different things. Oh, if you're in Bolivia, you don't have yes, you don't have a sea, so you probably don't use beaches as much as mountains for holidays. Right, so build routines into your classroom. Boom, 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 boom. You know, you're responding. It's very much just one digit. Give the students the power. We've still got questions coming through. Yeah, answering different things. Those suggestions I gave you. I mean, it's a very simple way of giving students some power. And I think students will enjoy it. So it's a way for you to assess your students. You can see what they are. You can see how well they're working. It's not formal assessment, it's informal assessment. You're getting them to produce, maybe not so much speaking, but more writing, which sometimes we don't develop enough. Recycling language is really important. The thing about the colors I was doing earlier, is it about colors? No, it's about the simple present, to be honest, and listening comprehension and typing and students giving their opinion and students participating. So giving students power and listen to other teachers. The piece of advice I used to give was go and observe the teacher in the next classroom. If you've got a spare 5 minutes, observe the teacher in the next classroom. You will learn so much. Even if they're a good teacher or a bad teacher, you will learn a lot. Zoom. If you have a blackboard, a whiteboard in Zoom, and I don't remember. No, let me not go into that area. Let me not get distracted. I'm getting excited. This is my problem. Observe other teachers, see what other teachers say, listen to other teachers, talk to other teachers about their experiences. Oh, I tried this. It's really simple. It works. Ta-da. Yeah. Okay, plan B. Every single teacher should have a plan B. I sometimes work with young teachers or younger, less experienced teachers, and they go into a classroom with a beautiful lesson plan, but no plan Bs. Plan Bs are incredibly useful. Have things up your sleeve, yeah? And where are you going to get them from? You don't need to create them yourself. Steal them from other teachers. Listen to other teachers. There's so much stuff around there on YouTube, yeah? That kind of thing, you know. I'm not going to ask you to do this. What do you prefer, dogs or cats? Boom, quickly. What do you prefer? Do you prefer rain or sunshine? Things like that, yeah? Those little things, boom, can change some kind of dynamic. Oh, WhatsApp, Natalie. I wrote a blog post, 25 ideas for using WhatsApp about 4 years ago. There are so many things you can do that. For speaking, WhatsApp is a brilliant tool. Right, time. So let's go through. The 20% rule. Again, the 20% rule is something which I invented, and it's not really very scientific. It is the idea that good teachers constantly try new things, and they don't always work. A plan A. Irma, a teacher once said to me, have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and plan H, jump out the window. That was his thing, you know, have all of those. Yes, it's not just plan A and plan B, but have very many. So the 20% rule, without distracting myself too much, the 20% rule is my own invention. It's the idea that when you try something for the first time, it doesn't normally work properly. And the reason it doesn't work is because the students are not familiar with it, or your instructions were not perfect, or you've misunderstood one of the variables inside the classroom, which is making it not work too well. So constantly try new things. Teachers, please try new things. And if it doesn't work the first time, well, generally they don't work well the first time. That's just the nature of trying things out as a teacher. So accept that as a teacher, when you try things out, they will not always work well the first time. And once you've tried it out, reflect, adapt, and try it again, yeah? Do not be afraid of trying things that don't work. The best teachers I've seen are the ones who constantly try things and they don't work, and they go, I know why it didn't work, or I can make it work the next time, yeah? Right, my Britishness means that I have to be on time. I think, if I'm correct, I need to be going to questions. At the first time, yes, routines, establishing routines. Once it becomes a routine, you free yourself from a lot of the pressure. Okay, I'm going to do a routine, and things work. Right, so those are some suggestions. Hopefully I've given you some things that you can use in your next class. Hopefully I'm not stressing the teachers who are not good with technology. Hopefully you can see that, you know, things can be very simple. And I'm a huge believer in a very open democratic chat. Yeah, you've been saying lots of different stuff. Oh, people are putting things are coming in from the La Libreria. Right, so I need to go to questions. I'm going to go to questions, and I think Freddie's going to help me out. But before I do that, I do also want, we're going to go for 10 minutes of questions, but I want to put this up, and if you can leave this up, Freddie, that would be, Fred, sorry, that would be absolutely brilliant. What we have here is a QR code. You can take it and you can give us your feedback, and you get a badge and a certificate that way. You can either use the QR code or that URL, which is there. So we would love to hear from you. And I do want you to have a chance to look at this, give us your feedback, and get your badge and your certificate from this, from us. So I'm going to leave that there. We're going to go to questions. Fred, are you going to help me with questions? Or am I going to do it on my own? There he is.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Well, we got 2 questions, so that's very interesting and interactive. Let's see, the first question is from Jen Isabel. She asked, what platforms do you suggest for online sessions?
Okay, I've been looking at platforms a lot recently. I use Teams. That's the one I use. And the reason I use it is because it's free in the software, which is provided by my company. Therefore, there's no cost. It is a crazy platform that does crazy stuff all the time. And I would not recommend it unless it's already automatically there with your company and has no cost. I think probably the friendliest and the easiest is probably Zoom. But there are other ones as well. LearnCube is one I've been investigating recently, which is good for schools and institutions to buy and then to organize their classes. So it does depend on what you're looking for. If it's about cost, functionality, or intuitiveness, I would probably say Zoom is probably the easiest one to use. But there are many factors to consider. Good.
Excellent.
Are there more questions? Yeah.
The next question is from Gonzalo Concha. So his question is this: how would you organize a 90-minute section? What would the stages be?
Oh, it does depend on the topic. A 90-minute, I mean, a regular class, right? You would need to have, okay, it's a bit difficult to answer that question in one go, but in a regular class, in a 90-minute session, you might have 5 tasks or something, or 5 blocks. I would probably put in a few more, 6 or 7 different blocks to make it a bit more dynamic. I would also put in a section for trying to train your students for some kind of strategies or working in a flipped environment. I would also, something which I think is really important, in a face-to-face class, there's a kind of a social element, right? Students talking to the people next to them. Maybe you have a chat with the teacher for 5 minutes at the beginning. I've seen many teachers do that. My suggestion is build in some social time. Don't just focus on your class, but build in some time when the students are going to be communicating with each other, or you're talking about plans for the next weekend. Think about them as humans, and that the fact that we have this social interaction in a regular class and it kind of disappears. So make sure that you put that in, and maybe put it in at different stages, maybe at the beginning, somewhere in the middle, and somewhere at the end. A big question, too difficult to answer in one go. Yeah? Another question?
Okay. No, that's all. Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Do you have any question? Just to wrap up with this, please, if you have any comments, sir.
From me?
Yes.
Sorry? No. Well, thank you very much for your invitation to Oxford and also my opportunity. I love the opportunity to work with people from different countries. I do live in Mexico. Mexico is part of Latin America, but every country is different, and it's fantastic to work with different people from around the world. Thank you very much for taking this time on a Saturday morning or afternoon, depending where you are. And I hope, my sincere hope is I've given you 1 or 2 things that you can put into your classes and that your students will enjoy English a bit more. So just thank you very much for your participation from TDS conference and everybody who joined me today. So thank you very much. It's a real pleasure.
Okay, sir. We really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have just wrapped up these presentations, the block in the morning. So let me give you just some instructions. Well, what we're gonna say is thank you very much to our speakers for the presentations and to all the teachers who have been connected this morning. It has been a very productive morning, and as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have a break for lunch, and then we are coming back at 3 p.m. Please keep in mind 3 p.m. Peruvian time with the last 2 presentations for the event. And please, one more thing. Some of you were asking about the certificates. Well, to obtain the certificate of attendance, you must participate at least 5 of the conferences of the 7 that we are offering in total. And at the end of the event, all registered attendees will receive the certificate information in their emails. And the last but not least, please see you at 3 p.m. before 3 p.m. Have a good lunch. Have a good afternoon. See you at 3 p.m. Bye-bye.